The crystal chandelier above the ballroom cost more than most people earned in a year. Yet Emily Carter barely noticed it. The glittering lights reflected across polished marble floors. Waiters in black tuxedos moved gracefully between hundreds of guests carrying trays of champagne. New York's most powerful executives, investors, politicians, and socialites filled the grand hall of the Imperial Crown Hotel. Everyone had gathered for one reason: the annual Carter Global Foundation Gala. And tonight, everyone expected an announcement. An announcement that would make headlines across the country before sunrise. Emily Carter was supposed to become engaged. The daughter of billionaire businessman Richard Carter and future heir to Carter Global Industries was expected to announce her relationship with Nathan Kingsley, the company's celebrated young CEO. It was the perfect match, at least on paper. Nathan was wealthy, powerful, handsome, educated. Every magazine called him one of America's most eligible bachelors. Every business publication praised his leadership. Every member of New York's elite social circle believed he and Emily were destined to become the city's next power couple. Everyone believed it. Except Emily. She stood near the ballroom entrance wearing an elegant emerald evening gown that had taken 3 designers nearly a month to create. The dress was flawless. Her smile was flawless. Her appearance was flawless. Everything about her looked perfect. Everything except her eyes. Because her eyes carried something nobody seemed willing to notice. Exhaustion. Emily looked across the ballroom toward the raised stage where her father was speaking with investors. Richard Carter looked exactly as powerful as he always did. Tall, confident, commanding. The kind of man who could make million-dollar decisions between sips of coffee. The kind of man who expected the world to obey him, including his daughter. Especially his daughter, Emily. She didn't need to turn around to recognize the voice. Nathan Kingsley. She forced a smile before facing him. Nathan looked like he had stepped out of a luxury magazine advertisement. His tailored tuxedo fit perfectly. His dark hair was neatly styled. His confident smile never seemed to disappear. Most women would have been thrilled to have his attention. Emily only felt tired. "You look beautiful tonight," Nathan said. "Thank you. The press is already asking questions." "I'm sure they are." Nathan laughed softly. "They're expecting something big." Emily took a sip of sparkling water. "They usually are." Nathan stepped closer. "You seem nervous." "I'm not nervous." "You don't sound convinced." Emily looked around the ballroom. Everywhere she turned, she saw expectations. Expectations from her parents. Expectations from investors. Expectations from employees. Expectations from strangers who knew nothing about her life. For 28 years, people had decided what her future should look like. Tonight felt no different. Nathan followed her gaze. "They all adore you." Emily shook her head. "They adore the idea of me." Nathan didn't know how to respond. Few people ever did. Because very few people cared enough to listen. Instead, they listened to the version of Emily Carter they had created in their minds. The billionaire princess, the future executive, the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect everything. Nathan adjusted his cufflinks. "After tonight, things will become easier." Emily looked at him. "Easier." "Our engagement." The word felt heavier than it should have. Engagement. Not love. Not happiness. Not partnership. Engagement. A business arrangement wrapped in expensive jewelry. Nathan smiled confidently. "The board will love it." Emily almost laughed. Of course. The board. The investors. The shareholders. Everyone seemed excited about the future except the 2 people supposedly building it. Before she could answer, a loud voice interrupted them. "Emily." Her mother approached. Victoria Carter looked as elegant as always. Graceful. Beautiful. Perfectly composed. She kissed Emily's cheek. "The photographers are waiting." Emily sighed internally. "Of course they are." Victoria noticed Nathan beside her and smiled. "There you are." Nathan nodded politely. "Good evening, Victoria." Victoria looked between them. The expression in her eyes carried unmistakable approval. Emily knew that look. Her mother had been giving it to Nathan for years. The look of someone admiring a successful investment. "Everyone is excited for tonight," Victoria said. Emily felt the pressure tightening around her chest. Not excitement. Pressure. The difference mattered. Unfortunately, nobody else seemed to recognize it. A photographer approached. "Miss Carter, Mr. Kingsley." Nathan immediately offered his arm. Emily hesitated, only for a second, but Nathan noticed. Her mother noticed. The photographer noticed. Emily forced herself to accept his arm. Flash, flash, flash. The cameras exploded with light. Nathan smiled. Emily smiled. The photographs would look perfect. Nobody would see the emptiness hidden beneath them, because cameras captured appearances, not truth. The photo session lasted nearly 15 minutes. By the end, Emily felt trapped. Every conversation revolved around Nathan, their future, their expected engagement, their expected marriage, their expected life. A life nobody had actually asked if she wanted. Eventually, Emily escaped, at least temporarily. She slipped away from the ballroom and into a quieter way, connecting the hotel's conference wing. The sudden silence felt wonderful. No cameras, no investors, no expectations, just peace. For the first time all evening, she could breathe. She walked slowly down the corridor. The hotel staff moved efficiently around her. Most guests barely noticed them. Emily always did. Maybe because she understood what it felt like to be overlooked, not truly seen, only used. As she rounded a corner, she noticed someone kneeling beside a decorative fountain. A maintenance worker. He appeared to be repairing part of the fountain's filtration system. His dark maintenance uniform contrasted sharply against the luxury surroundings. Most guests would have walked past without a second glance. Emily almost did. Then she noticed something strange. The worker was reading. A book rested beside his toolbox. Not a magazine, not a manual, a book. Curious, Emily slowed down. The man looked up. For a brief moment their eyes met. Brown eyes, steady eyes, calm eyes. Not intimidated, not impressed, just present. The maintenance worker immediately stood. "Sorry, ma'am." Emily glanced at the book. "You're reading during work?" The man smiled slightly. "During breaks." "What is it?" He looked surprised by the question. Most wealthy guests never asked him anything. Behavioral economics. Emily blinked. That wasn't the answer she expected. Behavioral economics. "Yes." He picked up the book. "It's interesting." Emily laughed softly. Most people don't describe economics as interesting. They haven't read the right books. For the first time that evening, Emily smiled genuinely. Not a public smile. Not a rehearsed smile. A real one. The maintenance worker noticed. Something warm appeared in his expression. Not flirtation, just kindness. A rare thing. "What's your name?" Emily asked. The man hesitated, perhaps wondering why someone wearing a designer gown wanted to know. "Lucas." "Lucas what?" "Lucas Reed." Emily extended her hand. "Emily Carter." Lucas stared at her hand briefly, then shook it. His grip was firm, confident, respectful, not overly eager, not nervous, simply normal. And somehow that felt extraordinary, because nobody treated Emily normally anymore. Lucas released her hand. "I know who you are." Emily smiled. "I figured. The gala is kind of a giveaway." She laughed again. A real laugh. The sound surprised even her. Lucas seemed amused by her reaction. "You don't seem to enjoy these events." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Is it that obvious?" "Little? That bad?" Lucas considered. "You look like someone attending a meeting she didn't schedule." Emily stared, then laughed harder, because somehow that was exactly right. Lucas smiled. The moment felt unexpectedly comfortable. Simple. Honest. Normal. Things Emily rarely experienced anymore. For several minutes they talked. About books. About New York. About work. Nothing important. Yet somehow everything felt important. Because Lucas listened. Actually listened. Not because of her last name. Not because of her wealth. Not because of what she could offer him. He listened because he cared about the conversation. It felt refreshingly rare. Eventually a voice echoed down the hallway. Emily? Her mother's voice. Searching. Emily sighed. Reality returning. Lucas stepped back slightly, understanding immediately. You should probably go. Probably. Neither moved. For a brief moment the silence lingered. Comfortable. Unexpected. Then Emily smiled. It was nice meeting you, Lucas. You too. She started walking away, then paused, turning back. By the way, Lucas looked up. You were right. About what? About what? The gala. He smiled. The meeting you didn't schedule. Emily nodded. Exactly. Lucas laughed. The sound followed her down the hallway. For reasons she couldn't explain, the weight on her shoulders felt slightly lighter. Back inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had changed. Guests were gathering around the stage. The announcement was approaching. Emily spotted her parents immediately. They looked excited. Nathan stood beside them. Confident. Prepared. Certain. Emily suddenly realized something. For the first time all evening, she had spent 10 minutes talking to someone who expected absolutely nothing from her. And those 10 minutes had been the best part of her night. A strange thought. A dangerous thought. Because people like Emily Carter weren't supposed to notice people like Lucas Reed. That was the rule. The unspoken rule of their world. Yet she had noticed. And for reasons she didn't yet understand, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Across the ballroom, Nathan lifted a champagne glass. Guests applauded. The evening's main event was beginning. Emily walked toward the stage. Toward the future everyone had prepared for her. Toward expectations. Toward pressure. Toward decisions. But somewhere in the back of her mind lingered the memory of a quiet maintenance worker sitting beside a fountain reading a book about economics. A man who hadn't cared about her money. Hadn't cared about her family. Hadn't cared about her status. Only about the conversation. Only about the person. And although Emily didn't know it yet, that brief encounter was about to change everything. Because sometimes the most important moments in life don't happen under spotlights. They happen in quiet hallways, between strangers, before either person realizes their lives are about to collide. And tonight had been the beginning. The beginning of a choice that would shock everyone. Text the next morning, Emily Carter woke up thinking about a janitor. Not Nathan Kingsley. Not the board meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock. Not the dozens of emails waiting on her phone. A janitor. The realization irritated her. It made no sense. She barely knew Lucas Reed. Their conversation had lasted less than 15 minutes. Yet somehow his face had followed her home. His calm eyes. His easy smile. The way he spoke to her like she was simply another person. Not Emily Carter. Not the billionaire heiress. Not the future face of Carter Global. Just Emily. She sat up in bed and looked through the massive windows of her penthouse apartment. The Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly before her. Millions of people. Thousands of businesses. Hundreds of opportunities. And somehow she was thinking about the man repairing a fountain at a hotel gala. Ridiculous. She pushed the thought away. At least she tried to. Unfortunately, her mind had other plans. Because no matter how often she reminded herself that Lucas was simply a stranger, she kept remembering how easy their conversation had felt. Effortless. Unlike almost every conversation she had these days. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. Board meeting at 10. Nathan will be attending. Emily sighed. Of course he would. Nathan attended everything. And somehow every meeting, dinner, charity event, or corporate gathering ended with someone hinting about marriage. She got dressed and headed toward Carter Global headquarters. The company's tower dominated the Manhattan skyline. 84 floors of glass and steel. A monument to power. A monument built by her father. Employees hurried through the main lobby as she entered. Executives greeted her. Assistants smiled politely. Security personnel nodded respectfully. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone treated her accordingly. Emily smiled and greeted people as she walked toward the elevators. Then something caught her attention. Near the far side of the lobby, Lucas was working. He was polishing a brass handrail beside the staircase. Completely focused. Completely unaware that she had stopped walking. For some reason, seeing him there felt different than seeing him at the hotel. More real. This wasn't a gala. There were no chandeliers, no designer gowns, no glamorous atmosphere, just ordinary life. Lucas looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief second, surprise crossed his face. Then he smiled. The same genuine smile from the night before. Good morning. Emily found herself smiling back. Good morning. Several employees walking nearby looked confused. Their billionaire executive was talking to a janitor. That alone was unusual enough to attract attention. Lucas seemed to notice. Emily noticed him noticing. Yet unlike everyone else, he didn't appear uncomfortable. How's the fountain? She asked. Lucas laughed softly. It survived. Good. I was worried all night. The sarcasm made her laugh. A nearby executive looked shocked. Emily Carter rarely laughed during work hours. Lucas continued polishing the handrail. You look less trapped today. Emily raised an eyebrow. Less trapped. Compared to the gala. Oh, she smiled. That's because nobody's taking pictures. Fair point. For a moment neither spoke. Then Lucas nodded toward the elevators. You should probably get upstairs before someone accuses me of distracting an executive. Emily glanced around. Several people were already staring. You're probably right. Lucas returned to work. The conversation ended naturally. No awkwardness. No hidden agenda. No expectation. And somehow that made it more memorable than most conversations she had during the rest of the day. By noon, Emily had endured 3 meetings, 1 budget review, 2 investor calls, and 47 mentions of Nathan Kingsley. She escaped to the executive dining room hoping for a few minutes of peace. Unfortunately, Nathan was already there. Emily. She resisted the urge to sigh. Nathan. He stood and pulled out a chair. The gesture was polite, predictable, calculated. Everything Nathan did seemed carefully designed, like he was always performing, always managing perceptions, always selling a version of himself. Nathan sat across from her. About last night. Emily froze slightly. What about it? I think it went well. Of course he did. For Nathan, success was measured in appearances. The photos looked good. The investors seemed pleased. Therefore, the evening had been successful, simple. Emily stirred her coffee. Did it? Nathan smiled. You don't agree. I think everyone got what they wanted. His smile faded slightly. Everyone. Emily changed the subject. She wasn't interested in another conversation about their future. At least not today. Especially not after meeting Lucas. For reasons she couldn't explain, her encounter with the janitor had exposed something uncomfortable. The difference between genuine connection and strategic compatibility. Nathan represented compatibility. Lucas represented connection. And suddenly the distinction felt impossible to ignore. After lunch, Emily decided to walk through several departments before returning to her office. She occasionally did this to stay connected with employees. At least, that was the official reason. Today she had another reason. One she wasn't ready to admit. Her route eventually brought her near the building's maintenance offices. The door stood partially open. Inside, several workers sat around a table during their break. Lucas was among them. He was reading again, the same economics book. Emily paused outside. She should keep walking. Instead, she knocked lightly. The room became silent. Every maintenance employee immediately stood, except Lucas. Not because he was disrespectful, because he hadn't noticed her yet. When he finally looked up, surprise crossed his face. Emily. The others looked even more shocked. She smiled. Sorry to interrupt. One of the workers quickly offered her a chair. Emily politely declined. Lucas closed his book. You lost. The question made several employees nearly choke. Nobody spoke to executives that way, especially not billionaires. Emily laughed. Maybe? Lucas stood. What brings you down here? She considered lying. Instead, she told a partial truth. I wanted a break. Lucas nodded. That answer seemed perfectly reasonable to him. No judgment, no suspicion, just acceptance. The other workers quietly excused themselves. Within moments, only Emily and Lucas remained. The room suddenly felt smaller, more personal. Emily glanced at the book, still reading economics. Lucas shrugged. It's a bad habit. I didn't know reading could be a bad habit. It is when it keeps you awake until 3 in the morning. Emily smiled. You read that much? Every chance I get. She studied him carefully. The more she learned about Lucas, the less he matched her assumptions. Most people saw a janitor and stopped there. Emily was beginning to suspect there was much more beneath the surface. What did you study? Lucas looked surprised. Study? In college. For the first time, something guarded appeared in his expression. A small shift. Easy to miss. Yet Emily noticed. Finance. The answer stunned her. Finance. Lucas nodded. Long time ago. You have a finance degree. Almost. Not quite. The word carried weight. Emily sensed a story. A painful one. Lucas looked away briefly. My father got sick. Understanding dawned immediately. You left school. He nodded. Needed money. Emily felt her chest tighten. The simplicity of his explanation somehow made it sadder. No self-pity, no bitterness. Just fact. Life happened. Dreams changed. Responsibilities came first. Lucas smiled lightly. Turns out hospitals are expensive. Emily didn't know what to say, because she had never worried about hospital bills. Never worried about choosing between education and family. Her world operated differently. The realization made her uncomfortable. Not guilty, just aware. Aware of how sheltered her life had been. Lucas noticed her expression. Don't look so serious. I'm sorry. For what? She hesitated. For what happened? Lucas considered, then smiled. Life happens. The calm acceptance in his voice impressed her. Most people carried their disappointments like chains. Lucas carried his like lessons. That difference fascinated her. A phone vibrated. Emily glanced at the screen. Another meeting, another responsibility, another obligation. She sighed. Lucas noticed. Back to work. Unfortunately, he smiled. The glamorous life of a billionaire. Emily laughed. You have no idea. Lucas grinned. I probably don't. She stood. For a moment neither moved. Neither seemed eager for the conversation to end. An unfamiliar feeling. At least for Emily. Most conversations felt exhausting. This one felt easy. Comfortable. Natural. Finally, she stepped toward the door. See you around. Lucas. Probably. Emily smiled. Then left. As she walked away, she realized something. For the second day in a row, her favorite part of the day had involved a janitor. Not a CEO. Not an investor. Not a politician. A janitor. And somehow that fact no longer seemed ridiculous. Meanwhile, Lucas watched her disappear down the hallway. Then slowly sat back down. His coworkers immediately returned. The moment they entered, questions exploded. What was that? Lucas laughed. I have no idea. Emily Carter came here to talk to you. I noticed. Why? Lucas honestly didn't know, and that uncertainty bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Because Emily Carter belonged to a world completely separate from his. Different rules. Different expectations. Different realities. People like her didn't spend time with people like him. Not usually. Yet for some reason, she kept showing up. And despite every reason to keep his distance, Lucas found himself looking forward to seeing her again. A dangerous thought. One he quickly pushed away. Because fairy tales weren't real. And neither were billionaire heiresses interested in janitors. At least that's what Lucas told himself. Unfortunately, he wasn't entirely convinced. Neither was Emily. And somewhere deep inside both of them, something unexpected had already begun. A connection neither understood. A friendship neither planned. And perhaps the first small crack in the wall's society had spent a lifetime building around them. Nathan Kingsley had never lost a competition, at least not one that mattered. By the age of 34, he had built a reputation that most executives spent an entire lifetime chasing. Business magazines called him a visionary. Investors called him a genius. The board of Carter Global called him the future. Nathan preferred a different word. Winner. Winners succeeded. Winners acquired what they wanted. Winners controlled outcomes. And for the past 3 years, Nathan had viewed Emily Carter as the final piece of a perfect future. Not because she was beautiful, though she certainly was. Not because she was intelligent, though she was one of the smartest people he had ever met. Not even because he loved her. Nathan rarely thought about love. Love was unpredictable, messy, difficult to control. No, Nathan wanted Emily because she fit. She fit the image, the legacy, the future, the empire. Together they would become the most powerful couple in corporate America. At least that was the story he had been telling himself. And until recently, he had been certain Emily would eventually agree. Now he wasn't so sure, because something had changed. He noticed it during meetings. He noticed it during dinners. He noticed it whenever he mentioned their future. Emily seemed distracted. Distant, less willing to follow the path everyone expected. Nathan didn't like uncertainty, especially when it involved something he considered his. That morning he stood inside his corner office overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly below. His assistant entered carrying a tablet. "Your 10 o'clock is here." Nathan nodded. "Send them in." The meeting began. Investors, numbers, acquisitions, expansion plans, the usual. Yet despite the importance of the discussion, his thoughts kept drifting elsewhere. Toward Emily. Toward the strange distance growing between them. Toward the uncomfortable feeling that he was losing control of a situation he had already considered settled. By lunchtime, he decided to do something about it. If Emily was pulling away, he would pull harder. Simple. Direct. Effective. The same strategy that worked in business. He contacted one of New York's most exclusive jewelry designers. Then reserved a private rooftop restaurant for the following weekend. Not a proposal. Not yet. But something close enough to remind Emily where her future belonged. With him. That afternoon, Emily sat through another board meeting. Nathan occupied the seat directly across from her. As usual, he dominated the conversation. Confident. Charismatic. Prepared. Everyone listened. Everyone admired him. Everyone except Emily. Because the more she watched Nathan, the more she noticed something she had previously ignored. Everything he did seemed calculated. Every smile. Every compliment. Every joke. Every gesture. Nothing felt spontaneous. Nothing felt real. Perhaps she was being unfair. Perhaps she was simply seeing things differently now. After all, once someone experiences genuine authenticity, manufactured perfection becomes easier to recognize. And Lucas Reed was authentic. Painfully authentic. He never seemed interested in impressing anyone. The thought appeared unexpectedly. Emily immediately tried to dismiss it. Comparing Nathan and Lucas was ridiculous. They lived in completely different worlds. Yet her mind kept doing it anyway. Nathan wanted admiration. Lucas seemed indifferent to it. Nathan controlled every room he entered. Lucas barely noticed whether people were paying attention. Nathan carefully built an image. Lucas simply existed. The comparison shouldn't have mattered. But somehow it did. After the meeting ended, Emily gathered her notes. "Emily?" Nathan approached. She looked up. "Yes, I made reservations." Though her stomach sank slightly. "Reservations? Saturday night." "Of course." Nathan smiled confidently. "The Sky Terrace. One of the most expensive restaurants in the city." The reservation alone probably cost more than many people earned in a month. Emily forced a polite smile. That sounds nice. Nathan noticed the lack of enthusiasm. You don't seem excited. Emily chose her words carefully. I've just been busy. Nathan studied her. Something wasn't right. He could feel it. For years, Emily had followed the expected script. Now she seemed increasingly determined to improvise. And Nathan hated improvisation. Before he could continue, Emily's phone rang. A welcome interruption. She answered quickly. The call involved a problem at one of Carter Global's charitable housing projects. An urgent issue. A legitimate reason to leave. When the conversation ended, she stood. I have to go. Nathan nodded, though disappointment flickered briefly across his face. Saturday. Emily hesitated. Only for a second. But Nathan noticed. Again, Saturday. She finally confirmed. Yet somehow the answer didn't feel reassuring. Not to him. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Emily visited one of the company's community development projects in Brooklyn. She preferred field visits to boardrooms. Real people. Real problems. Real impact. Unlike endless meetings about projections and profit margins. The project manager walked her through several buildings. Families greeted her warmly. Children played in nearby courtyards. The experience reminded her why she cared about the company in the first place. Not wealth. Not power. People. On the drive back to headquarters, traffic delayed her nearly an hour. By the time she returned, most executives had already left. The building felt quieter, more peaceful. Emily stepped into the lobby, then noticed someone sitting near the employee cafe. Lucas. He was reading again. Of course he was. She smiled before she could stop herself. Lucas looked up, immediately noticing her. You look tired. Emily laughed. Not hello. Not good evening. Just an observation. I am tired. Lucas closed his book. Bad day. Long day. He nodded knowingly. Those are worse. Emily sat across from him. The action surprised both of them, though neither mentioned it. What about you? Lucas shrugged. Nothing exciting. Somehow I doubt that. He smiled. My day involved replacing a broken air conditioning unit. Emily leaned back. See? Lucas looked confused. See what? Most people would describe that as boring. It was boring. You didn't complain. Lucas thought about it, then laughed. Maybe I just got used to it. Emily studied him. One thing she appreciated about Lucas was his perspective. He rarely focused on what was wrong. Not because life had been easy. Quite the opposite. He simply chose not to waste energy on things he couldn't change. It was refreshing. Especially compared to executives who complained whenever their private jets were delayed. Lucas noticed her watching him. What? Emily smiled. Nothing. You were analyzing me. No. Definitely yes. She laughed. Lucas grinned. For several minutes they talked. About books, about the city, about random observations. The conversation wandered naturally. No agenda. No expectations. Just two people enjoying each other's company. Something increasingly rare in Emily's life. Eventually she mentioned the housing project. Lucas listened carefully, as always. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully. Sounds important. It is. You seem happier talking about that than corporate meetings. Emily smiled. That's because I am. Lucas wasn't surprised. He had already noticed something most people missed. Emily genuinely cared about people. Not because it improved public relations. Not because it generated positive headlines. Because she actually cared. The realization made him respect her even more. Unfortunately, it also made things complicated. Because the more time he spent around Emily Carter, the harder it became to remember all the reasons he should keep his distance. She was kind, smart, funny, authentic, and completely out of reach. A dangerous combination. Nearby, several employees entered the lobby. Their conversation immediately stopped when they saw Emily sitting with a janitor. The silence was noticeable. Lucas noticed. Emily noticed. The employees quickly looked away. pretending nothing had happened. Lucas sighed. There it is. There what is? The staring. Emily frowned. They shouldn't stare. They do. I don't care. Lucas smiled slightly. Maybe. Emily folded her arms. No, really. Lucas considered her expression. She meant it. That surprised him. Most people cared deeply about appearances. Especially wealthy people. Especially executives. Emily seemed different. And that difference was becoming harder to ignore. As the lobby slowly emptied, evening settled across the city. Outside, lights illuminated the streets. Inside, the conversation continued. Easy, comfortable. Unexpected. Neither wanted it to end. Eventually, Emily checked the time. Oh no. Lucas looked amused. What? I've been here almost an hour. He smiled. Time flies. Emily stood reluctantly. Apparently. Lucas gathered his book. His shift was ending as well. For a brief moment they walked toward the exit together. An ordinary action. Yet it felt strangely significant. Near the revolving doors, they stopped. The city glowed beyond the glass. Traffic moved through the streets below. Life continued around them. Unaware that something important was beginning. Emily smiled. Good night, Lucas. Good night, Emily. Neither moved immediately. The moment lingered, comfortable. Then Emily stepped into her waiting car. Lucas headed toward the subway station. Different directions, different worlds, yet both carried the same thought, the same question. Why did these conversations feel so easy? Because neither had an answer. Not yet. Across the city, Nathan Kingsley sat alone in his penthouse reviewing plans for Saturday. The restaurant, the gifts, the future. Everything was arranged perfectly. He remained confident, certain, unaware that while he was carefully planning grand gestures, someone else was quietly accomplishing something far more powerful. Without expensive dinners, without luxury gifts, without calculated strategies, Lucas Reed was simply becoming the person Emily looked forward to seeing most, and neither man yet understood where that would lead. But the distance between them was shrinking, while the distance between Emily and Nathan was growing. Slowly, quietly, inevitably, and before long everyone would notice. The following Monday began with rain. Heavy rain, the kind that transformed Manhattan into a blur of headlights, umbrellas, and rushing footsteps. From the 42nd floor of Carter Global headquarters, Emily Carter watched water stream down the enormous glass windows surrounding her office. The city looked distant, muted, almost peaceful. Unfortunately, her schedule was anything but peaceful. 3 executive meetings, a strategy review, an investor presentation, and a dinner with Nathan later that evening. The thought alone exhausted her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Her assistant entered carrying a folder. The board presentation is ready. Emily accepted it. Thank you. As the assistant turned to leave, she hesitated. Miss Carter. Yes. The employee satisfaction reports arrived. Emily looked up. Unlike most executives, she actually read those reports. What do they say? The assistant smiled. Maintenance department scored highest again. Emily wasn't surprised. For some reason, hearing that made her think of Lucas. Again, lately that seemed to happen constantly. Almost everything reminded her of him. A book, a conversation, a thoughtful comment, even a simple report. She opened the presentation folder and immediately lost interest. Profit forecasts, growth projections, market analysis, important information, necessary information. Yet somehow none of it felt alive. Not compared to real conversations. Not compared to real people. By noon, Emily had endured 4 straight hours of meetings. Her patience was nearly gone. The boardroom had become suffocating. Everyone talked. Nobody listened. Everyone had opinions. Few had understanding. The moment lunch arrived, she escaped. Instead of heading toward the executive dining room, she found herself walking somewhere else. Somewhere she hadn't consciously planned to go. The employee cafeteria. More specifically, the corner table where she had seen Lucas eat several times, As she entered, she immediately spotted him. He sat alone near a window reading another book. The sight made her smile. Lucas noticed her a second later. His eyebrows lifted. Lost again. Emily laughed. Apparently. Lucas gestured toward the empty chair across from him. Getting to be a habit. Emily sat down. Maybe. Several nearby employees immediately noticed. Whispers began almost instantly. Emily ignored them. Lucas noticed but didn't seem concerned. "What are you reading today?" she asked. Lucas turned the book toward her. The Psychology of Decision-Making. Emily groaned dramatically. More economics. Psychology. Economic psychology. Still counts. Emily shook her head. "You know, normal people read novels." Lucas smiled. "Normal people don't voluntarily attend board meetings either." She laughed. Fair point. A comfortable silence settled between them. Not awkward, not forced, simply comfortable. Emily realized how unusual that was. Most people rushed to fill silence. Lucas didn't. He seemed perfectly content, simply existing in the moment. Eventually, she opened her lunch container. Lucas glanced at it, then laughed. "What? That's lunch." Emily looked down. A carefully prepared salad, fresh fruit, imported sparkling water. "What about it?" "My lunch cost $8. Emily glanced at his sandwich, then back at her meal, and started laughing. Lucas joined her. The difference was absurd, yet somehow funny. Not embarrassing, not uncomfortable, just funny. "You're judging my salad." I absolutely am, bum. It's healthy. It looks expensive." "That's not the same thing." Lucas smiled. Close enough. The conversation drifted naturally from topic to topic. Books, movies, the city, childhood memories. For the first time, Emily found herself talking about things she normally kept private. Nothing deeply personal, but enough to surprise herself. At one point, Lucas asked a simple question. "What was your childhood like?" Emily froze. The question seemed innocent, yet answering it felt strangely complicated. Different. Lucas waited. He never rushed people. Never interrupted. Never pressured. Just listened. Emily appreciated that. After a moment, she continued. "I grew up surrounded by money." Lucas nodded. "I figured. But not freedom." That caught his attention. Emily stared out the cafeteria window. "When you're born into a family like mine, everyone plans your life before you can plan it yourself." Lucas remained silent, listening, as always. "My schools were chosen." She smiled sadly. "My hobbies were chosen." A pause. "My friends were often chosen." Lucas understood more than she realized. Because expectations came in many forms. Some arrived through poverty. Others arrived through privilege. Either way, they could feel like chains. Emily looked back at him. "Sometimes people assume money solves everything." Lucas nodded slowly. "It doesn't." "No." Her voice softened. "It really doesn't." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain continued outside. Employees moved around them. The world kept turning. Yet somehow the small table near the window felt separate from everything else. A place where honesty could exist. Eventually Lucas spoke. "My childhood wasn't exactly free either." Emily looked up. Lucas rarely talked about himself. That alone made her pay attention. "My father worked 3 jobs." He smiled slightly. Not because he wanted to. Emily listened carefully. "Most of my childhood involved helping however I could." A brief pause. "We weren't poor all the time." Another pause. "But we were poor often enough." Emily felt her chest tighten. Lucas spoke calmly, matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Yet she could hear the sacrifices hidden beneath his words. "You gave up college for your father." Lucas nodded. "Yeah. Do you regret it?" The question lingered between them. Lucas looked out the window, thinking carefully. Finally he answered. Sometimes. His honesty surprised her. Most people would have given a noble answer. No regrets. Family comes first. Lucas simply told the truth. "I missed the future I thought I was going to have." Emily nodded. Understanding. "That's fair. But I don't regret helping him." He smiled slightly. Both things can be true. Emily stared at him. The answer felt wiser than anything she'd heard during her morning board meetings. Both things can be true. Such a simple idea. Yet people spent entire lives struggling to understand it. A person could love their family and still mourn lost dreams. A person could appreciate privilege and still feel trapped. A person could be successful and still be unhappy. Both things could be true. Emily smiled. You know that? What? You say surprisingly smart things for a janitor. Lucas laughed loudly. Whoa. What? That's the worst compliment I've ever received. Emily covered her face. Oh my God. Lucas continued laughing. You almost had it. I didn't mean it like that. You absolutely did. She groaned. I meant. Lucas raised a hand. I'm kidding. Emily threw a napkin at him. Lucas caught it. Still laughing. For several seconds neither could stop smiling. Nearby employees stared openly now. Nobody cared. Not Emily. Not Lucas. For the first time in years, Emily felt normal. Not important. Not influential. Not wealthy. Normal. And she loved it. Unfortunately, the moment couldn't last forever. A familiar voice interrupted them. Emily? Both looked up. Nathan Kingsley stood nearby. His expression remained pleasant, professional, polite, yet something in his eyes had changed. Something colder. Something sharper. Emily immediately felt tension enter the air. Nathan. Nathan's gaze shifted toward Lucas. Briefly. Measured. Calculating. Then returned to Emily. The board is looking for you. Emily glanced at her watch. She still had 20 minutes before the meeting. Nathan knew that. Which meant he hadn't come because the board needed her. He had come because he saw her sitting with Lucas. Lucas seemed to realize the same thing. He stood, gathering his book, his lunch, his things. I should get back to work. Emily frowned. You don't have to leave. Lucas smiled politely. It's fine. Nathan said nothing, which somehow made the situation worse. Lucas nodded toward Emily. See you later. Then he walked away. Nathan watched him go. Only after Lucas disappeared did he speak. Interesting. Emily folded her arms. What is? You spend a lot of time with him. There it was. The real reason Nathan had approached. Emily kept her expression neutral. He's a friend. Nathan smiled. A perfectly controlled smile. I see. The words sounded harmless, yet something underneath them felt dangerous, possessive, judgmental, dismissive. Emily didn't like it, not one bit. Nathan. His eyes met hers. Yes, they're actually a board emergency. A pause. Then he smiled again. No. Emily nodded slowly. She already knew the answer. Nathan looked toward the direction Lucas had disappeared, then back at her. Just be careful. The statement confused her. Careful of what? Nathan's expression remained calm. People aren't always who they appear to be. Emily stared at him. For some reason the comment bothered her. Not because of what he said. Because of how he said it. Like he already believed Lucas wasn't good enough. Hadn't earned trust. Hadn't earned respect. All because of a job title. Emily's voice cooled noticeably. I'll keep that in mind. Nathan seemed satisfied. At least for the moment. He nodded and walked away, leaving Emily alone at the table, staring out at the rain, thinking. For the first time, she saw something she had previously ignored. Nathan never asked what made her happy. Never asked what she enjoyed. Never asked who she wanted to become. He only focused on where she belonged, what she should do, who she should be with. Lucas was different. Lucas asked questions. Lucas listened. Lucas saw her. Not her status. Not her future. Her. And as the rain continued falling beyond the glass windows, Emily realized something that should have frightened her. She was starting to look forward to lunch more than any part of her day. Because lunch meant conversations. And conversations meant Lucas. The realization should have seemed impossible. Yet it felt increasingly natural. Meanwhile, across the building, Lucas pushed a maintenance cart through a quiet hallway. His thoughts remained fixed on the cafeteria, on Emily, on Nathan, and on the uncomfortable look he had seen in the CEO's eyes. Lucas wasn't naive. He understood how the world worked. Men like Nathan Kingsley didn't like competition, especially from people like him. A janitor, a nobody. Lucas told himself not to worry. Told himself none of this meant anything. Told himself Emily was simply a friend. But deep down, another voice whispered a different truth. A truth he wasn't ready to admit. He looked forward to seeing her too, and that made everything far more complicated than either of them realized. The text, by Wednesday morning, the rumors had reached the 48th floor. By Thursday afternoon, they had reached the executive wing. By Friday, they had spread through nearly every department inside Carter Global headquarters. The story changed depending on who told it. Some employees claimed Emily Carter had become interested in a maintenance worker. Others insisted they were secretly dating. A few people even suggested Lucas Reed possessed some hidden connection to the Carter family. Nobody knew the truth. That didn't stop them from talking. Rumors rarely needed facts. They only needed curiosity. And nothing generated curiosity faster than seeing a billionaire heiress repeatedly spending time with a janitor. Emily remained unaware of how widespread the gossip had become. At least initially. She had bigger concerns. A major acquisition was approaching. The board remained divided. Investors wanted answers. The company demanded attention. Unfortunately, concentrating had become increasingly difficult. Not because of the acquisition. Not because of the board. Because she kept finding herself wondering whether Lucas was having a good day. The realization should have alarmed her. Instead, it simply felt natural. That fact alarmed her even more. Late Friday morning, Emily left another exhausting strategy meeting. The discussion had lasted nearly 3 hours. 3 hours of arguments. 3 hours of projections. 3 hours of people pretending certainty about an uncertain future. She needed fresh air. Or at least the closest thing available inside a corporate tower, coffee. As she entered the employee cafe, conversations immediately softened. Not stopped. Softened. The difference was subtle, yet noticeable. Emily frowned. Something felt off. Employees avoided eye contact. Others watched her discreetly. A few smiled awkwardly. The atmosphere felt strange, uncomfortable. Emily ordered coffee. As she waited, she noticed 2 junior analysts whispering nearby. The moment they realized she was looking in their direction, both suddenly became fascinated by their phones. Emily's suspicion grew. Something was happening. She simply didn't know what. Coffee in hand, she headed toward her office. Halfway there, she encountered her friend and executive assistant, Megan Lawson. Megan looked uncomfortable. That alone was concerning. Megan rarely looked uncomfortable. "What's wrong?" Emily asked. Megan hesitated. "Nothing." Emily narrowed her eyes. "Megan." Another pause. Finally, Megan sighed. "People are talking." Emily immediately understood. Not the details, the subject. About what? Megan gave her a look. Who? Lucas. Of course. Emily felt irritation rise instantly. What exactly are they saying? Megan winced. Do you really want to know? No. A pause. Yes. Megan sighed again. Most people are just curious. And the rest? The rest are being idiots. Emily already hated the conversation. She leaned against the hallway wall. Tell me. Megan lowered her voice. They think you're dating him. Emily blinked. Dating. Among other things. The irritation deepened. Not because people believed she was dating Lucas. Because of the tone she could already imagine. The judgment. The assumptions. The condescension. Megan continued. Some employees think it's romantic. Emily almost laughed. And others. They think it's impossible. That answer annoyed her even more. Impossible. Why? Because Lucas worked in maintenance. Because he wasn't wealthy. Because he didn't wear expensive suits. Emily folded her arms. That's ridiculous. Megan nodded. I agree. Emily appreciated her honesty. Megan had always been one of the few people willing to speak openly. Does Lucas know? Megan's expression answered before her words did. Oh, Emily sighed. Of course he knew. Everyone probably knew. The realization made her feel guilty. Not because she had done anything wrong. Because Lucas didn't deserve unwanted attention. Especially not because of her. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Lucas pushed a maintenance cart through the accounting department. He knew about the rumors. How could he not? Employees stopped talking whenever he entered a room. People stared, whispered, speculated. Some treated him differently. Others avoided him entirely. Most annoying of all, a few people suddenly acted friendly. Not because they liked him. Because they believed he had somehow become connected to power. Lucas hated that. If people respected him, he wanted it to be genuine. Not because they thought he might have influence. Near the copy room, 2 employees accidentally confirmed his suspicions. Neither realized he was approaching. I heard she had lunch with him again. No way. I'm serious. What does she even see in him? Lucas stopped walking. Not intentionally. The words simply froze him in place. The second employee laughed. Maybe he's secretly a millionaire. The first laughed too. Their amusement echoed down the hallway. Lucas quietly turned around and walked away. Neither employee noticed him. A few minutes later, he found himself alone inside a storage room. Not because he needed supplies. Because he needed silence. He leaned against a shelf and exhaled slowly. The rumors weren't surprising. People always talked. The problem was something else. The problem was that part of him cared. Part of him worried about Emily. Part of him worried about what this attention might do to her reputation. Part of him worried about how much he looked forward to seeing her. That last thought troubled him most. Because every day it became harder to ignore. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Lucas turned. Emily stood in the doorway. Neither spoke immediately. Both seemed surprised, though perhaps not as surprised as they should have been. Almost as if they had begun expecting to find each other. Emily noticed the expression on his face. Bad day. Lucas smiled faintly. Something like that. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter, more personal. For several seconds neither spoke. Finally Emily sighed. You heard. Lucas laughed softly. The rumors. She nodded. Lucas shrugged. Hard to miss. Emily looked frustrated. I'm sorry. That surprised him. For what? This. She gestured vaguely. The attention. Lucas studied her carefully. She genuinely felt responsible, which somehow made him respect her even more. You didn't start the rumors. I know. Then why apologize? Emily hesitated. Because she couldn't explain the real reason. She hated seeing him uncomfortable. And that realization felt dangerous. Instead, she settled on a simpler answer. Because it's affecting you. Lucas smiled. It'll pass. Maybe. It will. Emily wasn't convinced. Neither was Lucas. But neither wanted to discuss it further. Eventually, Lucas changed the subject. How was the meeting? Emily groaned dramatically. Terrible. Lucas laughed. That bad? Worse. She dropped into a nearby chair. For the next several minutes, she complained about executives, board members, presentations, financial projections. Lucas listened patiently, occasionally offering a comment, usually making her laugh. By the end, she felt noticeably better. Something Lucas seemed to notice. You always look happier after complaining. Emily pointed at him. That's because you're a good listener? Lucas considered that. Or maybe your meetings are just awful. She laughed. Also possible. The easy conversation reminded both of them why they enjoyed each other's company. No performance. No expectations. No hidden agenda. Just honesty. A rare thing. Especially in Emily's world. Unfortunately, someone else had begun noticing. High above them, inside the executive wing, Nathan Kingsley stared through a conference room window. He had just witnessed Emily entering the maintenance area. Again, His jaw tightened slightly. The feeling growing inside him wasn't jealousy. At least not entirely. It was something more complicated. Threat assessment. Nathan believed in understanding risks, analyzing variables, protecting investments. And lately, Lucas Reed had become a variable. One Nathan didn't fully understand. That bothered him. Nathan turned toward his assistant. "Tell me about Lucas Reed." The assistant looked surprised. The maintenance employee. "Yes." A brief pause. "What would you like to know?" Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. Everything. Downstairs, unaware of the conversation taking place above them, Emily and Lucas continued talking. Time passed quickly. As always, eventually Emily checked her watch and groaned. "I have another meeting." Lucas smiled. "My condolences." She laughed, standing reluctantly. For a moment neither moved. Neither seemed eager for the conversation to end. A feeling becoming increasingly familiar. Emily looked at him. The rumors, the gossip, the whispers. None of it seemed important right now. Not compared to this. Not compared to the simple comfort she felt whenever they talked. "See you later, Lucas." He smiled. "Probably." Emily headed for the door, then paused. Turning back. "Do the rumors bother you?" Lucas considered the question carefully, then answered honestly. "Not as much as they probably should." Emily smiled. For some reason, that answer made her happy. Perhaps happier than it should have. Lucas watched her leave, then returned to work. Yet his thoughts remained elsewhere, because for the first time, neither of them could pretend the situation was ordinary. People had noticed. People were talking. People were watching. And the attention would only grow. The walls separating their worlds were beginning to crack. Not collapse. Not yet. But crack. And once cracks appear, they have a habit of spreading. Especially when emotions become involved. Neither Emily nor Lucas had admitted those emotions. Not even to themselves. Yet the rumors spreading through Carter Global contained a dangerous truth. Not because Emily and Lucas were secretly dating. They weren't. Not yet. The dangerous truth was much simpler. They genuinely enjoyed being together. And every day that feeling grew stronger. Whether either of them was ready for it or not. The following week began with one of the most important events on Carter Global's calendar. The Executive Leadership Appreciation Gala. Unlike the charity gala from a few weeks earlier, this event was private. No reporters. No cameras. No public announcements. Just senior executives, major investors, board members, and selected employees celebrating another successful year. The event was hosted inside Carter Global's newly renovated headquarters. Every floor had been transformed. Elegant decorations filled the lobby. Live musicians performed near the grand staircase. Luxury catering occupied an entire conference wing. Everything reflected the image Richard Carter wanted associated with his company. Success, power, prestige. Emily stood near the main entrance watching guests arrive. She wore a simple navy evening dress. Beautiful. Elegant. Yet noticeably less extravagant than usual. Lately, she had lost interest in appearances. At least the kind designed to impress strangers. Emily, her father approached. Richard Carter looked pleased. The company had recently completed several major deals. Investors were happy. Profits were strong. The future looked bright, at least financially. "You seem distracted." Emily smiled politely. "Just tired." Richard studied her. For a moment she wondered whether he noticed the growing distance between them. If he did, he didn't mention it. Instead, he gestured toward the ballroom. "Tonight is important." Emily nodded. Everything was always important. Every dinner, every meeting, every event, every conversation. Important. The word had become exhausting. Try to enjoy yourself. Richard walked away before she could respond. Emily almost laughed. Enjoy herself. At a corporate appreciation event. That seemed unlikely. The evening began smoothly. Guests mingled. Investors networked. Executives discussed future plans. The atmosphere remained relaxed. for about an hour. Then things changed. Emily had stepped away from the ballroom to get fresh air. As she walked through a side corridor, she noticed movement near one of the service elevators. Lucas. He wore his maintenance uniform. Apparently, several members of the facilities team had been asked to remain on duty throughout the event. Not glamorous work, but necessary. Lucas looked surprised to see her. Escaping? Emily smiled. You know me too well. That's concerning. She laughed. Lucas leaned against the wall. You don't seem thrilled to be here. I'm beginning to think I never enjoy these things. Maybe that's because they're work. Emily nodded. Good point. For several minutes they talked. Nothing serious, nothing dramatic. Just conversation. Easy. Comfortable. Normal. Neither realized they were being watched. At the far end of the hallway, several executives had noticed them. One of them was Arthur Bennett, Senior Vice President. 60 years old. Arrogant. Dismissive. The type of executive who measured human value by job title. Arthur watched Emily laughing with a maintenance worker. His expression darkened immediately. Beside him stood several investors. And Nathan Kinsley. Nathan said nothing. But he watched carefully. Arthur shook his head. Incredible. One investor frowned. What is? Arthur nodded toward Lucas. That. The group followed his gaze, immediately understanding. Nathan remained silent. Arthur continued. She's spending time with maintenance staff during a leadership event. One investor looked uncomfortable. Another laughed. Nathan's expression remained unreadable. Arthur straightened his jacket. Excuse me. Nathan already suspected where this was heading. Unfortunately, he didn't stop it. Minutes later, Emily and Lucas were still talking when Arthur approached. His smile appeared friendly. His eyes were not. Emily. She turned. Arthur. Arthur nodded politely, then looked toward Lucas. The politeness vanished instantly. Don't you have work to do? The hallway became silent. Lucas immediately understood. So did Emily. Arthur wasn't asking a question. He was making a point. Lucas remained calm. I was on break. Arthur's smile tightened. A maintenance break. The emphasis was deliberate. Cruel. Humiliating. Emily felt anger immediately. Lucas simply stood quietly. Arthur turned toward her. You know how these events are. His tone suggested Lucas wasn't truly part of the event, only part of the furniture. Something useful but unimportant. Emily's irritation intensified. Lucas remained composed, which somehow made Arthur's behavior look even worse. Arthur continued. We all have responsibilities. Lucas nodded. Of course. Arthur seemed disappointed by the lack of reaction. Bullies often were. They preferred resistance. It made their behavior easier to justify. Instead, Lucas simply accepted the insult calmly, professionally, dignified. Arthur looked almost annoyed. Good. Then, he turned and walked away, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. For several seconds, neither Emily nor Lucas spoke. Finally, Emily broke the silence. He's an idiot. Lucas laughed softly. Probably. I'm serious. I know. Emily folded her arms. He had no right. Lucas looked surprisingly relaxed. People like him usually think they do. The statement bothered her. Not because it was wrong. Because it was true. Lucas had clearly experienced this before. Many times. Far too many times. Emily looked at him carefully. Doesn't it make you angry? Lucas considered the question. Sometimes. A pause. Mostly it makes me tired. The answer hit harder than anger would have. Because tired implied repetition. Years of it. Years of people looking down on him. Years of assumptions. Years of disrespect. Emily suddenly understood something she had never truly considered. Being ignored was painful. Being underestimated every day was worse. Before she could respond, another voice interrupted. Ladies and gentlemen. An announcement echoed through the building. The main presentation was beginning. Guests started moving toward the ballroom. Lucas stepped back. You should go. Emily didn't move. Emily. She looked at him. Then toward the crowd. Then back at him. Something inside her snapped. Not dramatically. Not explosively. Just enough. Enough to stop accepting things she knew were wrong. A few minutes later, the ballroom filled completely. Hundreds of guests occupied tables throughout the massive room. Executives, investors, department heads, selected employees. Richard Carter stood on stage delivering opening remarks. Everything proceeded according to schedule. Until the employee recognition segment. Each year, exceptional employees received awards. Most winners were managers, directors, executives, people with impressive titles. Tonight appeared no different. The first award went to a regional vice president. Applause. The second went to a senior financial analyst. More applause. Then Richard announced the next category. Outstanding service and dedication. A brief pause. Emily suddenly stood. Several people nearby looked confused. Richard looked confused too. She walked directly toward the stage. The room fell silent. Nathan watched carefully. Arthur looked irritated. Emily accepted the microphone from her father. Before the next award is announced, I'd like to say something. The silence deepened. Hundreds of eyes focused on her. Most assumed she was about to discuss the company's future. Or perhaps her future with Nathan. Nobody expected what came next. Emily looked across the room, then spoke clearly. Tonight we've celebrated leadership. A pause. We've celebrated success. Another pause. We've celebrated people whose names appear on office doors. Wests listened carefully. Confused. Curious. Emily continued. But companies aren't built by executives alone. The room became quieter. If every executive disappeared tomorrow, this company would struggle. A few nervous laughs. Then Emily pointed toward the back of the ballroom. Toward the maintenance staff. Toward Lucas. If every employee disappeared tomorrow, this company would stop functioning. Murmurs spread immediately. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. Nathan remained still, watching, analyzing. Emily wasn't finished. Some people wear expensive suits. She looked directly toward Arthur. The message landed instantly. Others wear maintenance uniforms. The room became completely silent. But dignity doesn't come from a job title. Another pause. It comes from character. No one moved. No one spoke. Emily looked toward Lucas. Their eyes met briefly. Then she turned back to the audience. Every person in this building deserves respect. The final sentence echoed through the ballroom. For several seconds nobody reacted. Then applause began. A few people. Then more. Then dozens. Eventually hundreds. The applause grew louder and louder. Some guests stood. Others remained seated. Arthur looked furious. Richard looked shocked. Nathan looked thoughtful. Lucas looked stunned. Emily handed the microphone back to her father. Then calmly returned to her seat. Her heart pounded. Yet she felt strangely peaceful. Because for once, she had said exactly what she believed. Not what people wanted to hear. Not what executives expected. What she believed. Across the room, Lucas couldn't stop staring at her. No one had ever done that for him. Not publicly. Not privately. Not ever. People defended themselves. People defended family. People defended friends. Emily had defended him. And that realization affected him more than he wanted to admit. The remainder of the event passed in a blur. Conversations, awards, presentations. None of it seemed important anymore, because everyone was talking about Emily. And Lucas. And the speech. The rumors that had already spread through the company now exploded completely. Some employees admired her. Others criticized her. Many were simply shocked. But one thing was undeniable. The situation had changed. Permanently. Later that evening, as guests departed, Emily stepped outside the building. The cool night air felt refreshing. Footsteps approached. She turned. Lucas. For a moment neither spoke. Finally Lucas smiled. You really didn't have to do that. Emily smiled back. Yes. A pause. I did. Lucas looked at her carefully. Trying to understand her. Trying to understand why she cared. The answer remained elusive. Because neither of them fully understood it yet. What they did understand was simpler. Every day they grew closer. Every day the connection deepened. And after tonight, pretending otherwise would become much harder. Especially because someone else had reached the same conclusion. High above them, through the glass windows of the executive floor, Nathan Kingsley watched them talking. His expression remained calm, controlled, professional, yet beneath the surface, something dangerous was beginning to grow. For the first time, Nathan no longer viewed Lucas Reed as a curiosity. He viewed him as a threat. And Nathan Kingsley had never been particularly kind to threats. The Monday after the appreciation gala felt different. Not because Carter Global had changed. The company still occupied the same towering skyscraper. The same executives attended the same meetings. The same investors demanded the same profits. On the surface, everything looked normal. Beneath the surface, however, something had shifted. Everyone had seen Emily Carter publicly defend a janitor. And nobody could stop talking about it. Employees discussed it in elevators. Executives discussed it behind closed doors. Board members discussed it during conference calls. Even employees from branch offices had heard about the incident. The story had spread far beyond headquarters. Unfortunately, so had the speculation. Emily arrived at work knowing exactly what awaited her. Questions, looks, whispers, judgment. She simply didn't care anymore. For years she had shaped her behavior around other people's expectations. Lately she found herself growing tired of that game. Very tired. As she stepped into the executive elevator, her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. Lunch today. We need to talk. Emily sighed. Whenever her mother said, "We need to talk," the conversation rarely ended pleasantly. Still, avoiding it would only delay the inevitable. She typed a quick response, then headed upstairs. By 10 o'clock she was sitting through another acquisition strategy meeting. Unfortunately, today's discussion was particularly painful. A proposed regional expansion had stalled. The projections didn't align. The risks were unclear. Nobody could agree on a solution. For nearly 2 hours, executives argued in circles. Emily listened patiently, then impatiently, then not at all. At one point she caught herself staring out the window wondering what book Lucas was reading today. The realization was embarrassing. She forced herself back into the meeting. Unfortunately, the discussion remained just as tedious as before. Finally, Richard Carter rubbed his temples. There has to be a better solution. No one answered. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. The silence stretched. Then Arthur Bennett cleared his throat. What could delay expansion until next year? Half the room immediately objected. The debate resumed. Round and round. The same arguments. The same problems. No progress. Eventually Richard ended the meeting. We'll revisit this tomorrow. Nobody looked satisfied. Especially not Emily. As she gathered her notes, she couldn't shake the feeling that the solution should have been obvious. The numbers weren't impossible. The problem simply needed a different perspective. An hour later, she found herself walking through the maintenance corridor. Officially, she was inspecting facility upgrades. Unofficially, well, she knew exactly why she was there. Lucas was sitting at a table reviewing paperwork. When he noticed her approaching, he smiled. There she is. Emily raised an eyebrow. There who is? The executive avoiding meetings. Well, she laughed. How do you know I was avoiding meetings? Lucas tapped his forehead. Gift. Emily sat across from him. I just spent 2 hours listening to executives argue. My condolences. Well, she smiled. Thank you. Lucas returned to the paperwork. Emily noticed several spreadsheets scattered across the table. Detailed spreadsheets. Very detailed. Curiosity immediately appeared. What are those? Lucas glanced down. Oh. He looked slightly embarrassed. Nothing. Emily leaned forward. That doesn't look like nothing. Lucas hesitated, then sighed. It's something I do for fun. Emily stared. For fun? Lucas nodded. Yeah, spreadsheets. I know. He laughed. I'm aware how that sounds. Emily picked up one of the pages. Her eyes widened instantly. This wasn't random data. This was financial modeling. Sophisticated financial modeling. Risk assessments. Cost projections. Revenue forecasts. The work looked remarkably professional. Far more professional than she expected. Far more professional than most people would expect. She looked at Lucas. Did you make these? Lucas immediately appeared uncomfortable. Maybe. Emily flipped through several pages. The quality was undeniable. Lucas. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, these are good. He shrugged. They're okay. Emily laughed. No. She pointed at the calculations. These are really good. Lucas seemed unsure how to respond. Compliments clearly made him uncomfortable, especially compliments involving something he genuinely cared about. Emily continued reviewing the documents. The more she read, the more impressed she became. Some of the forecasting methods were better than those used during her morning meeting. That realization stunned her. How long have you been doing this? Lucas thought for a moment. Years. For fun. Mostly. Emily shook her head. The situation felt absurd. An exceptionally talented financial analyst was working as a janitor. Not because he lacked ability, because life had taken him elsewhere. The thought bothered her more than it should, perhaps because she understood wasted potential. Perhaps because she recognized how unfair the world could be. Or perhaps because she simply hated seeing talent ignored. What was your plan? Lucas looked confused. My plan? When you studied finance. A brief silence followed. Then his expression softened. Investment management. Emily nodded. She could easily imagine it. The numbers, the analysis, the strategic thinking. Everything fit. What happened after you left school? Lucas smiled faintly. The usual. Hospital bills. A pause. Debt. Another pause. More debt. Emily's chest tightened. Lucas said it so casually, like discussing the weather. Yet she could hear the years hidden beneath those words. Years of sacrifice. Years of postponed dreams. Years of survival. Eventually he shrugged. Life moved on. Emily stared at the spreadsheets. No, life hadn't moved on. The dream had simply been buried, not destroyed. Buried. There was a difference. A very important difference. Before she could continue, her phone rang. Richard Carter. Emily answered immediately.
Dad.
Conference room 14. His voice sounded urgent. Now. The call ended. Emily frowned. That couldn't be good. She stood. Emergency. Lucas nodded. Good luck. Emily started walking away, then paused, turning back. Can I borrow these? She held up the financial models. Lucas blinked. Why? I want to read them. His surprise was almost comical. Seriously. Very seriously. Lucas laughed. Knock yourself out. Emily smiled, then hurried toward the executive floor. She arrived at conference room 14 a few minutes later. Inside, several senior executives looked frustrated. The expansion project again, of course. Apparently new data had complicated matters further. Richard looked exhausted. Nathan looked annoyed. Arthur looked pessimistic. Nobody looked hopeful. For the next 30 minutes, Emily listened carefully. The same problem. The same roadblocks. The same debate. Then something clicked. A memory. One of Lucas's spreadsheets. A forecasting adjustment. A risk allocation strategy. An alternative structure. Emily flipped open her folder. Her eyes scanned the pages. There it was, the solution. Not complete, not perfect, but enough. Her pulse quickened. Wait. The room fell silent. Richard looked at her. What? Emily stood, then carefully explained the revised approach. The room listened. Questions followed. More questions. Then calculations. Then analysis. Gradually the atmosphere changed. Confusion became curiosity. Curiosity became interest. Interest became excitement. By the end of the discussion, several executives were nodding. Nathan remained silent, but even he looked impressed. Richard stared at his daughter. That's actually excellent. Emily smiled slightly. The praise felt good. Yet something bothered her, because the idea wasn't entirely hers. It had originated elsewhere. Someone else deserved credit. Later that evening, she found Lucas near the loading dock. He was finishing paperwork. When he saw her approaching, he immediately noticed the expression on her face. What happened? Emily smiled. Your spreadsheet happened. Lucas looked confused. My spreadsheet. It solved the expansion problem. For a moment he simply stared, then laughed. No way. I'm serious. Lucas shook his head. You're kidding? Emily sat beside him. I'm not. For several seconds he looked genuinely speechless, a rare occurrence. Eventually he smiled, a real smile, proud, disbelieving, happy. The sight warmed her chest unexpectedly. You should have seen the boardroom. Lucas laughed. I probably would have been terrified. You would have been fine. Lucas looked away. The compliment clearly affected him, more than he wanted to admit. Emily studied him quietly. Something became increasingly obvious. Lucas wasn't lacking ability. He was lacking opportunity. The distinction mattered. A lot. For the first time, she found herself wondering something dangerous. What would happen if people saw what she was starting to see? Not a janitor. Not a maintenance worker. A brilliant mind. A capable strategist. A man who had simply been denied chances others took for granted. The thought stayed with her long after their conversation ended. Unfortunately, someone else had begun asking similar questions. That evening, Nathan Kingsley sat alone inside his office reviewing employee records. A file rested on his desk. Lucas Reed, Maintenance Department. Nathan slowly closed the folder. His instincts rarely failed him. And lately those instincts kept telling him the same thing. Lucas was more than he appeared. That alone was concerning. But another realization concerned him even more. Emily's feelings were changing. Nathan could see it. The way she smiled around Lucas, the way she defended him, the way she sought him out. Small things, subtle things, yet impossible to ignore. Nathan stared through the office window overlooking the city. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar. Not uncertainty, not concern, fear. Because despite all his power, wealth, and influence, he was slowly losing something he had always assumed belonged to him. And he had no intention of surrendering it without a fight. Meanwhile, far below the executive floor, Lucas Reed locked up the maintenance office, unaware that powerful people were beginning to pay closer attention to him. Unaware that old dreams were slowly resurfacing. Unaware that the path he thought he had abandoned years ago might not be gone after all. And most importantly, unaware that the bond between him and Emily had just taken another step forward. A step neither of them could reverse. Even if they wanted to. Over the next several weeks, a pattern quietly formed. Neither Emily nor Lucas planned it. Neither discussed it. Neither officially acknowledged it. Yet it happened anyway. Lunches became routine. Conversations became longer. Good mornings became expected. Good nights became memorable. Somewhere along the way, spending time together stopped feeling unusual. It simply became part of their lives. And that frightened both of them more than either wanted to admit. On a cool Thursday afternoon, Emily stood inside her office staring at her calendar. The entire day had been filled with meetings. Every hour occupied. Every minute scheduled. Yet somehow the only event she genuinely looked forward to was lunch. Specifically noon. Specifically a certain table near a cafeteria window. Her phone buzzed. Megan entered carrying documents. You're smiling. Emily looked up. What? You're smiling. I smile. Not during budget meetings. Emily laughed. Maybe I'm in a good mood. Megan folded her arms. Ha! Emily immediately recognized the expression. Megan knew something, or thought she knew something. That was dangerous. What? Megan grinned. Nothing. Emily narrowed her eyes. Megan. The grin widened. You have lunch plans. Emily froze for half a second. A mistake. Megan noticed instantly. Oh my God. Emily groaned. It's not what you think. That's exactly what someone says when it is. Emily threw a pen at her. Megan laughed and escaped before a second one followed. The moment the door closed, Emily leaned back in her chair, then sighed, because the truth was becoming difficult to ignore. She did look forward to seeing Lucas. Far more than she should, far more than was sensible, far more than was safe, and yet every day she found herself wanting just a little more time. One more conversation, one more laugh, one more hour. The realization sat heavily in her chest, not because it felt wrong, because it felt right. That was the dangerous part. Meanwhile, across the building, Lucas stood on a ladder replacing ceiling panels. His coworker Marcus handed him tools from below. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Marcus finally broke. "You like her?" Lucas nearly dropped the screwdriver. "What?" Marcus laughed. "You heard me." Lucas climbed down from the ladder. "You're insane." Marcus nodded. "Probably," then pointed. "But I'm still right." Lucas shook his head. "No." Lucas. "No." Lucas. "Stop." Marcus folded his arms. "When was the last time you talked about anyone this much?" Lucas opened his mouth, then stopped. Marcus smiled. "Exactly." The silence answered the question. Lucas hated that. "She's a friend." Marcus laughed. "Sure, a friend." "Of course." Lucas walked away. Unfortunately, Marcus continued following him. "Tell me something." Lucas ignored him. "When she walks into a room, do you notice?" No answer. Marcus grinned. "When she doesn't show up, are you disappointed?" Still no answer. Marcus laughed louder. "You're doomed." Lucas groaned. Because the worst part was that Marcus wasn't entirely wrong. Over the past month, Emily had become part of his routine, a part he genuinely enjoyed, and lately that enjoyment had become increasingly difficult to categorize. Friendship? Maybe. Something more? Possibly. The uncertainty troubled him, not because he feared his feelings, because he feared the consequences. People like Emily lived different lives, different worlds, different futures. Every logical thought pointed in the same direction. Stay careful. Stay realistic. Stay distant. Unfortunately, emotions rarely listen to logic. That Saturday afternoon, Emily surprised him. He was leaving the building when he received a text. An actual text. From Emily. "Coffee." Lucas stared at the screen, then read it again, then again. Eventually he replied, "Sure." 30 minutes later they sat inside a small cafe overlooking the Hudson River. No executives. No employees. No board members. No company. Just Emily and Lucas. For the first time, they were spending time together completely outside work. The realization felt significant. Neither mentioned it. The cafe was quiet, comfortable. The scent of coffee filled the air. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Emily smiled over her cup. "This is nice." Lucas nodded. "Yeah." A brief silence followed. Not awkward, just peaceful. Then Emily laughed. "What?" Lucas looked confused. "You seem nervous." "I'm not nervous." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You absolutely are." Lucas looked away, which only proved her point. Emily laughed harder. "Why?" Lucas sighed dramatically. "Because this is weird. Weird. We work together. You don't work with me. You know what I mean." Emily smiled. She did know what he meant. The situation wasn't normal. Yet strangely, neither seemed interested in stopping it. Hours passed. Neither noticed. They talked about everything. Favorite books, childhood memories, travel dreams, regrets, goals. The deeper the conversation became, the easier it felt. At one point, Emily asked a question she hadn't planned to ask. "What's your biggest regret?" Lucas looked out the window, thinking carefully. Finally, he answered, "Quitting." Emily understood immediately. College. Finance. The future he lost. Lucas smiled faintly. "Not because helping my father was wrong." A pause. "Because I stopped believing I could come back." Emily listened quietly. "I convinced myself that chapter was over." His voice softened. "Maybe it wasn't." Emily smiled. "No." Lucas looked at her. "It wasn't." For several seconds neither spoke. Something shifted. small, yet unmistakable. The conversation suddenly felt more intimate, more personal, more important. Emily quickly changed the subject. Not because she wanted to, because she needed to. The moment had become dangerous. They both felt it. Neither acknowledged it. Evening arrived. The city lights slowly illuminated beyond the river. The cafe grew quieter. Eventually they realized nearly 4 hours had passed. 4 hours. Neither could remember the last time a conversation had felt that effortless. Outside, the cool evening air greeted them. Cars moved along distant streets. The river reflected countless lights. For a moment they simply stood there. Neither eager to leave. Neither quite sure what to say. Finally Emily broke the silence. I had fun. Lucas smiled. Me too. A pause, then another. The kind that seemed to stretch longer than normal. The kind neither wanted to end. Lucas looked at her. Really looked at her. Not Emily Carter, the billionaire heiress. Not Emily Carter, the executive. Just Emily. And for one dangerous second, he imagined what it would feel like to kiss her. The thought appeared without warning. Immediate. Powerful. Terrifying. Lucas immediately pushed it away. Unfortunately, Emily was fighting a similar battle. Because as she looked at him standing beneath the city lights, she suddenly became aware of details she had never noticed before. The warmth in his eyes, the quiet confidence in his smile, the way he listened, the way he cared, the way she always felt better after seeing him. Dangerous observations, very dangerous. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The moment lingered. Then Emily's phone rang. The spell shattered instantly. Reality returned. She glanced at the screen. Her mother. Of course. Emily sighed. I should take this. Lucas nodded.
Yeah.
The moment passed. Or at least appeared to. Emily answered the phone. Lucas stepped back respectfully. Several minutes later the conversation ended. Her expression looked noticeably darker. Lucas noticed immediately. What happened? Emily sighed. My parents. He nodded. Understanding. They still pushing Nathan. Emily laughed humorlessly. Every chance they get. Lucas looked away. The mention of Nathan always created discomfort. A reminder of reality. A reminder of the world beyond their conversations. Emily noticed. For a moment she wanted to tell him something. Something important. Something honest. Instead she remained silent. Because she wasn't ready. Not yet. Neither of them were. Eventually they walked toward the parking area. The mood felt different now, not worse. Just heavier, more complicated. At her car they stopped. Again. Another lingering goodbye. Another moment neither seemed eager to end. Emily smiled. See you Monday. Lucas smiled back. Yeah. She entered the car. Lucas watched it pull away. Only after it disappeared did he begin walking toward the subway station. His thoughts remained elsewhere. On the cafe. On the conversation. On Emily. And on the growing realization that he was in serious trouble. Because somewhere along the way, friendship had stopped being a sufficient explanation. The problem was that he didn't know what the new explanation was. Or perhaps he did, and simply wasn't ready to admit it. Across the city, Emily stared out the window of her car. The same thoughts followed her. The same questions. The same emotions. The same uncertainty. Yet one thing felt increasingly clear. The connection between them was no longer accidental, no longer casual, no longer ordinary. Something real was growing, something powerful, something neither expected. And if it continued, eventually both of them would be forced to confront a truth they had spent weeks avoiding. The truth that every lunch, every conversation, every shared laugh, every lingering goodbye, had slowly been leading toward the same destination, a destination neither was prepared for. And a destination that would change everything. Nathan Kingsley hated uncertainty. For most of his life, uncertainty had been something that happened to other people. He planned, he prepared, he controlled outcomes. That philosophy had helped him rise faster than anyone expected. It had made him wealthy, influential, respected, and until recently, it had worked perfectly. Now, however, there was a problem. A problem named Lucas Reed. Nathan stood inside his office overlooking Manhattan. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath the evening sky. Normally, the view calmed him. Tonight, it did nothing. Because for the first time in years, he couldn't predict the outcome of a situation, and that bothered him. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." His assistant entered carrying a folder. "The information you requested." Nathan nodded. "Thank you." The assistant placed the folder on his desk and quietly left. The moment the door closed, Nathan opened it. Lucas Reed, Maintenance Department, Employment History, Education Records, Financial Records, Family History. Everything his investigators had been able to gather. Nathan began reading. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Lucas grew up in a working-class neighborhood, attended public school, earned strong grades, received a partial scholarship. Then came the turning point, his father's illness. Nathan studied the records carefully. Medical debt, lost income, abandoned education, years of financial hardship. The story painted a familiar picture. Someone with potential whose life had been derailed by circumstances. Ordinarily, Nathan might have respected that. Under different conditions. These were not different conditions. These were personal conditions. And personal conditions changed everything. Nathan continued reading, then paused. Interesting. Very interesting. A detail caught his attention. Lucas hadn't simply left college. He had left during his final year, only months away from graduation. Near the top of his class, Nathan leaned back in his chair. For the first time, he understood why Emily found Lucas interesting. The man wasn't unintelligent. Far from it. That realization should have reassured him. Instead, it made things worse. Because intelligence made Lucas more dangerous. Not professionally. Personally. Nathan closed the folder. His instincts confirmed what he had already suspected. Lucas was not simply a maintenance worker. He was a man whose life had taken an unexpected turn. A man with untapped potential. A man Emily could easily admire. And admiration often became something else. Nathan stood and walked toward the window. The situation required action. Careful action. Calculated action. The kind he excelled at. Meanwhile, Emily had no idea any investigation existed. She was focused on a different challenge. Her parents. Specifically dinner with her parents. An experience that seemed increasingly similar to corporate negotiations. The Carter family dining room looked more like a luxury boardroom than a place people actually enjoyed meals. Richard sat at one end of the table. Victoria sat at the other. Emily occupied the middle. The arrangement felt symbolic, and not in a good way. Dinner remained pleasant for approximately 12 minutes. Then Nathan's name appeared. As it always did. Victoria smiled. "We saw Nathan last weekend." Emily resisted the urge to sigh. "That's nice." Richard glanced up. "He's doing excellent work." "Has a good CEO." Victoria exchanged a glance with Richard. The look immediately raised Emily's suspicion. Something was coming. She knew it. Unfortunately, she was right. Victoria set down her fork. "Emily, here we go." "Yes. Have you given more thought to your future?" Emily closed her eyes briefly. There it was. The conversation. Again. "My future." Victoria nodded. "Marriage." "Of course." Emily pushed her plate away, suddenly losing her appetite. "Mum, we're only asking." "No." Richard's voice remained calm. "We're discussing reality." Emily laughed softly. A dangerous laugh. The kind produced by frustration. "What reality?" Victoria looked surprised. "The obvious one." Emily folded her arms. "And what's obvious?" Richard answered. "You and Nathan." There it was. The expectation. The assumption. The plan. A future already designed for her, without her participation. Emily stared at her father. "Have either of you ever asked what I want?" The question silenced the room. Not because they lacked an answer, because they hadn't expected the question. Victoria frowned. "We know what you want." Emily almost laughed. "New?" Her voice sharpened. You know what you want. The temperature in the room changed instantly. Richard set down his glass. Emily. New. Years of frustration suddenly surfaced. Years of expectations. Years of assumptions. Years of decisions made on her behalf. You've planned my entire life. Victoria looked genuinely confused. As parents should. Emily stared at her. The statement explained everything, and nothing. The remainder of dinner ended poorly. Voices remained controlled. Nobody shouted. The damage occurred anyway. By the time Emily left, she felt exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Deeply emotionally. The next morning she arrived at work earlier than usual. She needed a distraction. Work seemed like the safest option. Unfortunately, the moment she entered the building, she knew something was wrong. Employees were whispering again. Not normal gossip. Different gossip. Something new. Something fresh. Emily immediately noticed the tension. She headed toward her office. Halfway there, Megan intercepted her. The expression on Megan's face said everything. What happened? Megan hesitated. Then sighed. Someone leaked information. Emily frowned. What information? About Lucas. The answer instantly captured her attention. What kind of information? Megan handed her a printed email. Anonymous. Distributed throughout multiple departments. The contents made Emily's stomach tighten. The email detailed Lucas's unfinished education, his financial struggles, his father's illness, his debt history, private information, personal information, humiliating information. The message wasn't openly cruel. That made it worse. It disguised cruelty as curiosity. Every detail encouraged the same conclusion. Lucas wasn't good enough. Didn't belong. Would never belong. Emily felt anger immediately. Cold anger. Controlled anger. The most dangerous kind. Who sent this? Megan shook her head. No one knows. Emily already suspected otherwise. People didn't accidentally obtain information like this. Someone wanted these details shared. Someone wanted Lucas embarrassed. Someone wanted distance created. The timing felt suspicious. Very suspicious. Across the building, Lucas sat alone in a maintenance office. The email rested on the table. He had already read it, several times. Not because he wanted to. Because he couldn't stop. Every painful chapter of his life summarized in neat paragraphs. Every struggle. Every sacrifice. Every failure. Reduced to office gossip. Humiliation settled heavily in his chest. Not because the information was false. Because it was true. That was what hurt. The email reminded him of everything he had lost. Everything he hadn't become. Everything he still carried. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The door opened. Emily entered. Neither spoke immediately. Lucas already knew why she was there. She had the email in her hand. Emily looked furious. Lucas looked tired. For several seconds silence filled the room. Then Emily spoke. I'm sorry. Lucas laughed softly. The sound contained no humor. Everybody keeps apologizing. Emily sat across from him. How are you? Lucas considered the question. Then answered honestly. I don't know. The truth surprised even him. He genuinely didn't know. Angry, embarrassed, sad, frustrated, a mixture of everything. Emily placed the email on the table. This was deliberate. Lucas nodded. I know. Her voice hardened. Someone wanted to hurt you. Lucas looked down. Maybe. Emily leaned forward. Not maybe. The certainty in her voice surprised him. She looked more upset than he did. That realization affected him unexpectedly. For years he had carried his struggles alone. Now someone was angry on his behalf. Someone cared. The thought warmed him despite everything else. Lucas eventually shrugged. It is what it is. Emily immediately shook her head. No. What? No. Her eyes locked onto his. You don't get to do that. Lucas looked confused. Do what? Act like this doesn't matter. He stared at her. Emily continued. Your father's illness mattered. A pause. The sacrifices mattered. Another pause. The things you gave up mattered. Lucas couldn't look away. Nobody had ever defended his choices before. Not like this. Most people viewed his life as unfortunate, a cautionary tale, a failure. Emily viewed it differently. She viewed it as courage. The realization hit harder than he expected. For several seconds he said nothing, then finally spoke. "You really believe that?" Emily didn't hesitate. Yes. The answer arrived instantly. Without doubt, without qualification, without conditions, just yes. Lucas looked away, emotion unexpectedly tightening his chest, because part of him had spent years believing the opposite. Believing he had failed. Believing he had fallen short. Believing life had passed him by. Now Emily sat across from him, refusing to accept that narrative. Refusing to accept that he was less than what he could have been. And somehow her belief felt more powerful than his doubts. Neither noticed how close they had become. How intense the conversation felt. How personal the moment had become. Elsewhere in the building, Nathan watched through an office window. Not close enough to hear. Close enough to see. And what he saw troubled him deeply. Because Emily wasn't looking at Lucas with sympathy anymore. She wasn't looking at him with curiosity. She wasn't looking at him with friendship. She was looking at him with something far more dangerous. Belief. Respect. Admiration. The foundation upon which love is often built. Nathan recognized it immediately. Because for the first time, he wasn't fighting rumors. He wasn't fighting office gossip. He wasn't fighting appearances. He was fighting something real. And real things were much harder to control. As evening settled over Manhattan, the battle lines became clearer. Lucas had been wounded. Emily had chosen his side. Nathan had begun making moves. And somewhere beneath the surface, emotions neither Emily nor Lucas were ready to admit continued growing stronger. The friendship that once seemed harmless was becoming something else. Something deeper. Something impossible to ignore. And sooner or later, someone would be forced to make a choice. For the first time in her life, Emily Carter seriously considered walking away. Not from a meeting, not from a project, not from an argument, from everything. Without arrived quietly, without warning, without drama. It simply appeared one evening while she sat alone inside her penthouse overlooking Manhattan. The city glittered beneath the night sky. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of possibilities. Yet somehow Emily felt trapped. More trapped than she had ever felt before. Because the problem was no longer Nathan. The problem was no longer her parents. The problem was no longer Carter Global. The problem was choice. Or rather, the illusion of choice. For years everyone around her had insisted she was free. Free to live however she wanted. Free to pursue happiness. Free to shape her future. The past few months had exposed the truth. She was only free as long as her choices matched everyone else's expectations. The moment they didn't, the pressure began. The criticism. The manipulation. The disappointment. The control. And lately that pressure had become impossible to ignore. Her phone buzzed. Another message from her mother. Dinner Sunday. Nathan will be joining us. Emily stared at the screen. Then placed the phone face down. She couldn't do it. Not tonight. Not another conversation. Not another carefully disguised attempt to direct her future. Across the city, Lucas sat inside his small apartment. A finance textbook rested open on the table. He wasn't reading it. His mind remained elsewhere. On Emily. On the leaked email. On the way she had defended him. Again. The memory refused to leave. For years, Lucas had learned to handle disappointment alone. He had learned to absorb insults. Ignore judgment. Accept unfairness. That wasn't new. What was new was having someone stand beside him. Someone who genuinely believed in him. Someone who saw more than his job title. Someone who looked at him and saw potential instead of limitation. Emily had become that person. And that realization terrified him. Because every day it became harder to pretend his feelings hadn't changed. Harder to pretend friendship explained everything. Harder to ignore the truth. A truth he refused to say aloud. At least not yet. The next morning brought another challenge. Emily arrived at headquarters and immediately received a message. Her father wanted to see her. Now. Never a good sign. She entered Richard Carter's office 10 minutes later. The room felt unusually formal. Richard stood near the window. Victoria sat nearby. Neither smiled. Emily immediately understood. This wasn't a conversation. This was an intervention. Sit down. Richard's voice remained calm, controlled, professional. Emily obeyed, more curious than nervous. For the moment, Victoria folded her hands. We're concerned. Emily almost laughed. Of course they were. About what? Nobody answered immediately. That silence provided the answer. Lucas. Again. Always Lucas. Richard finally spoke. The rumors. Emily leaned back. What about them? Victoria exchanged a glance with Richard, then looked directly at her daughter. You've become very close to this man. Emily's jaw tightened slightly. This man has a name. Victoria ignored the comment. Richard continued. Emily. A pause. People are talking. There was not happiness, not feelings, not truth. Appearances. Always appearances. Emily folded her arms. People always talk. Not like this? Richard's voice sharpened slightly. Emily met his gaze. Then let them. The answer clearly wasn't what he expected. Victoria sighed. You don't understand. Emily laughed, a short laugh. A dangerous one. No. Her eyes narrowed. I understand perfectly. The room became silent. For a moment nobody moved. Then Richard stepped forward. What exactly is happening between you and Lucas Reed? The directness surprised her. Not because of the question. Because of how long it had taken someone to ask. Emily thought carefully. Then answered honestly. He's my friend. Victoria looked unconvinced. Richard looked skeptical. Emily noticed immediately. The realization hurt more than she expected. Not because they doubted her. Because they had already decided the answer. Neither seemed interested in hearing hers. Victoria spoke softly. You deserve more. The statement struck Emily like a slap. What does that mean? Victoria looked confused. You know what it means? No. Emily sat forward. Explain it. Neither parent spoke. Emily continued. What exactly makes him less? Richard rubbed his forehead. This isn't about Lucas. Then what is it about? Silence. Again. Because everyone knew the truth. Status. Money. Position. The things nobody wanted to say aloud. Emily stood. Slowly. Carefully. Her patience finally exhausted. He's a good person. Victoria sighed. Emily? No. Her voice remained calm. Yet the room somehow felt colder. He's kind. A pause. Honest. Another pause. Intelligent. Richard remained silent. Emily continued. He works harder than most executives I've met. Victoria looked frustrated. That isn't the point. Emily stared at her mother. Then what is? Neither answered. Because the answer sounded ugly when spoken aloud. The conversation ended shortly afterward, not because anyone changed their mind. Because nobody did. Emily left feeling worse than when she arrived, far worse. The next several days became increasingly difficult. Pressure arrived from every direction. Family, executives, social circles, even distant relatives suddenly seemed interested in her future. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had advice. Everyone knew what she should do. Nobody asked what she wanted. The irony wasn't lost on her. Meanwhile, Nathan intensified his efforts. Flowers arrived at her office. Expensive gifts appeared at her apartment. Dinner invitations multiplied. Every gesture appeared thoughtful, generous, perfect. And every gesture made Emily feel increasingly uncomfortable, because none of it addressed the actual problem. Nathan wasn't listening. He was campaigning. One Friday afternoon, he finally confronted the issue directly. They sat alone inside a conference room overlooking the city. Nathan studied her carefully. You've been avoiding me. Emily sighed. Not because he was wrong, because he was right. I've been busy. Nathan smiled faintly. We both know that's not true. The room fell silent. Nathan leaned forward. What changed? Emily looked away. Toward the skyline. toward freedom, toward anywhere but this conversation. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded tired. I don't know. The answer wasn't entirely honest, but it wasn't entirely dishonest either. Nathan watched her carefully. You do? Emily remained silent. Nathan continued. For years we wanted the same future. Emily almost corrected him. Wanted wasn't the right word. Expected. Planned. Assumed. Those words fit better. Nathan's expression hardened slightly. Then suddenly everything changed. There it was. The accusation. The implication. The unspoken name hanging between them. Lucas. Nathan didn't say it. He didn't need to. Emily felt frustration building again. Because somehow everyone treated Lucas like the problem, as though he had appeared and corrupted her judgment, as though she couldn't think for herself. Nathan stood, walking toward the window. His reflection stared back at them both. I can give you everything. The statement hung in the air. Heavy, confident, certain. Emily stared at him, and suddenly realized something important. That sentence perfectly explained the difference between Nathan and Lucas. Nathan focused on what he could give. Lucas focused on who she was. A subtle distinction, yet enormous. Nathan continued. The life you've always known. Emily smiled, sadly. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe she didn't want the life she'd always known, not anymore. That realization followed her through the rest of the day, through the evening, through the weekend. By Monday morning, the pressure had become unbearable. She needed space, perspective, air. Without thinking, she found herself heading toward the maintenance level, toward the one person who never demanded anything from her. Lucas was organizing equipment when she arrived. The moment he saw her, concern appeared. What's wrong? Emily laughed softly. No greeting, no small talk. Straight to the truth. Exactly what she needed. Everything. Lucas immediately set down the equipment. For the next hour they sat together, talking, walking, sharing silence. No solutions, no speeches, no pressure. Just presence. And somehow that helped more than anything else. At one point they stopped near a large window overlooking the city. The afternoon sunlight reflected across countless buildings. Emily stared outward. I feel trapped. The confession escaped before she could stop it. Lucas didn't rush to answer. Didn't interrupt. Didn't offer advice. Eventually he spoke. Then don't stay trapped. Emily laughed sadly. It's not that simple. No. Lucas nodded. It never is. A pause. Then he looked at her. Really looked at her. But that doesn't mean you stay somewhere you don't belong. The words settled deep inside her, because for the first time in weeks, someone wasn't telling her what to choose. He wasn't telling her what future she should want. He wasn't telling her who she should become. He was simply reminding her that the choice belonged to her. And somehow that mattered more than anything else. Neither noticed how close they stood, how personal the moment felt, how much emotion existed beneath the surface. Neither was ready for that conversation. Not yet. But the distance between them continued shrinking, day by day, moment by moment, choice by choice. And as Emily looked out over the city, one truth became increasingly clear. A decision was coming, an unavoidable decision, between expectations and happiness, between duty and desire, between the life others wanted for her and the life she might actually choose. The impossible decision. And when the moment finally arrived, it would change all of their lives forever. The impossible thing about feelings was that they rarely arrived all at once. People imagined love as a lightning strike, a dramatic moment, a sudden realization. In reality, it often arrived quietly. One conversation at a time, one shared smile at a time, one moment at a time, until eventually, what had once seemed impossible became impossible to ignore. That was where Emily Carter found herself. And Lucas Reed was discovering the same truth. Neither wanted to admit it. Neither felt prepared for it. Yet every day made denial more difficult. The signs were everywhere. Emily noticed them first thing every morning. She looked for Lucas when she entered the building. She noticed when he wasn't there. She remembered things he said. She found herself smiling at random moments because of conversations they'd had days earlier. The realization terrified her. Not because her feelings felt wrong. Because they felt right. Far too right. Across the building, Lucas faced the same problem. Only worse. Because unlike Emily, he never forgot the reality separating them. She was Emily Carter, billionaire heiress, future leader of one of the most powerful companies in America. He was a maintenance worker. No matter how many conversations they shared, no matter how much time they spent together, that fact remained. At least it should have. Unfortunately, emotions rarely respected facts, and every day Lucas found himself caring more. One Thursday evening, Emily remained at headquarters later than usual. A major project had consumed most of the day. By 8 o'clock, nearly everyone had gone home. The building felt unusually quiet, peaceful. She welcomed the silence. After finishing the final report, she decided to leave. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed a familiar figure near the elevators. Lucas. He was carrying a toolbox, apparently finishing a late repair. Their eyes met. Both smiled automatically. The reaction had become instinctive. Long day? Lucas asked. Emily laughed. The longest. Lucas nodded. I can see it? You can. You have your board meeting face. Emily stared. My what? Lucas grinned. That expression. What expression? The one that says you've spent too many hours listening to executives. Emily laughed loudly. The sound echoed through the empty hallway. For some reason, hearing him describe it made the entire day feel lighter. Lucas smiled. There it is. What? The normal smile. Emily shook her head. You make that sound rare. It kind of is. She pretended to be offended. Lucas laughed. For a moment neither moved toward the elevators. Neither seemed eager to end the conversation. Eventually, Emily glanced toward the city lights beyond the windows. Want coffee? The question escaped before she could overthink it. Lucas looked surprised. Then smiled. Sure. 20 minutes later, they sat inside a small diner several blocks from headquarters. Not a luxury restaurant. Not an expensive rooftop venue. Just a simple neighborhood diner. The kind of place Nathan Kingsley would probably never visit. Emily loved it immediately. The waitress recognized Lucas. That surprised her. You come here often? Lucas shrugged. Sometimes. The waitress smiled. He practically lives here. Lucas groaned. The waitress laughed and walked away. Emily found herself smiling. The interaction felt genuine, comfortable, real. Something she increasingly valued. Coffee arrived. Conversation followed naturally. As always, the hours slipped away unnoticed. Eventually, the discussion turned more personal. Perhaps because the diner had grown quieter. Perhaps because they had grown closer. Perhaps because neither could keep avoiding certain truths forever. Emily stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. Can I ask you something? Lucas nodded. Anything. She hesitated, then asked, Why haven't you gone back? Lucas immediately understood. School. Finance. His abandoned future. He stared into his coffee for several seconds, thinking carefully. Finally, he answered, Fear. The honesty surprised both of them. Emily remained silent, allowing him space. Lucas continued. I kept telling myself I'd go back eventually. A faint smile appeared, then eventually became years. Emily listened carefully. No one likes admitting they're afraid. Lucas laughed softly. No. A pause. Especially when the thing you're afraid of is failing. The confession settled heavily between them. Because Emily understood, more than he realized. She wasn't afraid of failure. She was afraid of disappointing everyone around her. Different fear. Same prison. Eventually Lucas looked at her. What about you? Emily frowned. What about me? What are you afraid of? The question struck deeper than expected. For several moments she didn't answer. Then finally she did. The wrong life. Lucas stared. Emily laughed nervously. That sounds dramatic. No. His voice softened. It doesn't. For the first time in a long while, Emily spoke openly, completely openly, about expectations, pressure, family, Nathan, the future everyone had chosen for her. Lucas listened without interruption, without judgment, without advice, simply listening. When she finished, silence followed, not uncomfortable silence, thoughtful silence. Then Lucas spoke. You know something? What? You deserve to be happy. The simplicity of the statement caught her off guard, because nobody ever said that. People told her what was practical, what was smart, what was expected. Very few people talked about happiness. Lucas always did. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly something shifted, not gradually, not subtly, immediately. The diner disappeared. The city disappeared. Everything else disappeared. There was only Lucas, the warmth in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, the kindness he never seemed aware of. And for the first time, Emily stopped fighting what she already knew. The truth. She cared about him, far more than friendship could explain. Across the table, Lucas experienced a similar realization, because the way Emily looked at him had changed. Something was different, something honest, something vulnerable, and suddenly he understood. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to know they were standing at the edge of something neither could walk away from. Neither spoke, neither moved. The moment stretched, growing heavier, more meaningful, more dangerous. Finally, Emily whispered, Lucas. His heart immediately accelerated. Yeah. The single word barely emerged. Emily opened her mouth, then stopped. Because how could she explain everything she was feeling? How could she explain months of growing connection? Months of shared conversations? Months of becoming the most important person in each other's lives? She couldn't. So she said the only thing she could. Thank you. Lucas looked confused. For what? Emily smiled softly. For seeing me. The words landed harder than anything else could have, because Lucas understood exactly what she meant. Not Emily Carter, not the heiress, not the executive. Her, just her. Lucas swallowed, emotion unexpectedly tightening his chest. You don't have to thank me for that. The answer arrived automatically, honestly, without thought. Because to him, seeing Emily had never required effort. It had always felt natural. The realization hit both of them simultaneously, and suddenly there was nowhere left to hide. No more excuses, no more pretending, no more denial. The truth existed between them. Clear, undeniable, real. They left the diner shortly afterward. Neither wanted the evening to end, yet neither knew how to continue it. Outside, cool air drifted through the city streets. Traffic moved in the distance. Streetlights illuminated the sidewalk. Everything looked ordinary. Nothing felt ordinary. They walked slowly, talking less than usual, feeling more than usual. Eventually, they stopped near the riverfront. The water reflected thousands of city lights. Beautiful, quiet, perfect. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The silence said enough. Emily looked at him. Lucas looked at her. And suddenly all the reasons they should stay apart felt smaller than the reasons they wanted to stay together. Not gone, just smaller. For months they had been moving toward this moment, conversation by conversation, step by step, without realizing it. Now there was nowhere else to go. Lucas took a small step closer. Emily didn't move away. Another step. Still no movement. Only anticipation. Only emotion. Only truth. For a second neither breathed. Then Emily closed the distance. The kiss was gentle, tentative, honest. Everything neither had been able to say. The city disappeared. The world disappeared. Only the moment remained. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke immediately. Neither trusted their voice. Emily laughed softly. A nervous laugh. A happy laugh. A relieved laugh. Lucas smiled. The expression in his eyes said everything. Neither needed words. Eventually Emily shook her head. I can't believe we just did that. Lucas laughed. Me? Neither. A pause. Then another. Neither regretted it. Not for a second. The realization should have frightened them. Instead, it felt like coming home. Unfortunately, reality still existed. Families existed. Nathan existed. The company existed. The complications hadn't disappeared. If anything, they had multiplied. Both knew it. Neither cared. Not tonight. Tonight belonged to them. Tomorrow could deal with consequences. Tomorrow could deal with expectations. Tomorrow could deal with impossible choices. But tonight was different. Tonight was the beginning of something neither could deny anymore. Because friendship had ended. Something deeper had taken its place. And no matter what happened next, neither Emily nor Lucas would ever be the same again. For exactly 12 hours, Emily Carter allowed herself to be happy. 12 wonderful hours. 12 peaceful hours. 12 hours without worrying about consequences. Then reality arrived, and reality arrived hard. The morning after their kiss, Emily woke up smiling. For a few seconds, she simply lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the river, the city lights, Lucas, the kiss, the feeling that months of confusion had finally transformed into clarity. For the first time in a very long while, she felt certain about something, certain about someone. Then her phone started ringing. The smile disappeared immediately. Her mother, followed by her father, followed by Nathan, followed by 3 board members. Then Megan. That was when Emily knew. Something had happened. Something bad. She answered Megan's call first. What's wrong? Silence. Then, you need to get to the office. Emily sat upright instantly. What happened? Another pause. Megan. The hesitation told her everything. People know. Emily's stomach dropped. People know. 3 words. 3 terrible words. Because there was only one thing people could possibly know. The kiss. 40 minutes later, Emily stormed into Carter Global headquarters. The atmosphere felt different immediately. Employees stared. Conversations stopped. Whispers followed her through the lobby. Her heart sank. The rumors were no longer rumors. Somehow the truth had escaped. Inside the executive elevator, she finally checked social media. The first post appeared instantly. Then another. Then dozens more. A blurry photograph, taken from a distance. Near the riverfront. 2 people standing close together. Then kissing. Emily and Lucas. The image wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was clear enough. Very clear. Someone had seen them. Someone had taken a picture. And someone had shared it. Now everyone knew. The elevator doors opened. Megan was waiting. The expression on her face confirmed Emily's worst fears. It's everywhere. Emily nodded. She already knew. Who leaked it? We don't know. Emily laughed bitterly. That answer was becoming familiar. Nobody ever knew. Yet somehow information always spread. Megan handed her a tablet. News sites, business blogs, social media pages, corporate gossip accounts. Everywhere. The headlines varied. Billionaire hires dating company janitor. Future executive's shocking romance. Emily Carter chooses maintenance worker over CEO rumors. Emily closed the tablet, disgusted, not because of the relationship, because of how people described it. Like Lucas wasn't a person. Like he was a headline, a curiosity, a joke, a scandal. Her anger grew. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Lucas experienced a much worse morning. The moment he entered the building, people stared. Openly. No whispers. No subtlety. Just staring. Some employees looked supportive. Others looked amused. Several looked judgmental. Lucas hated all of it. He had spent years avoiding attention. Now he couldn't escape it. Near the maintenance office, Marcus approached. You okay? Lucas laughed softly. No. Fair? Lucas dropped into a chair. Exhaustion already settling into his bones. The kiss itself wasn't the problem. He didn't regret it. Not even slightly. The attention was the problem. The scrutiny. The judgment. The feeling that his private life had suddenly become public property. A knock interrupted them. The door opened. Emily entered. The moment she saw him, the rest of the room disappeared. Marcus immediately got the message. I'll leave. Neither noticed him leaving. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Emily sighed. What a disaster. Lucas laughed. A little. The humor lasted approximately 2 seconds. Then reality returned. Emily sat beside him. Closer than before. No point pretending now. The entire company already knew. I hate this. Lucas nodded. I know. They won't stop. No. A pause. They won't. The honesty hurt. Because both knew it was true. People loved stories. Especially stories involving status. Especially stories involving power. Especially stories involving someone breaking social expectations. Emily looked at him. Do you regret it? The question escaped before she could stop it. Immediately she wished she could take it back. Lucas stared at her. Then shook his head. Without hesitation. Without doubt. No. The answer arrived instantly. And despite everything else, Emily smiled. Because her answer would have been the same. Not for a second. Not even now. Unfortunately, someone else had a very different opinion. Nathan Kingsley spent the morning in a state he rarely experienced. Fury. Controlled fury. The most dangerous kind. He sat inside his office staring at the photograph. Again, and again, and again. Each viewing made the reality more obvious. He had lost. Not officially. Not publicly. But emotionally. Emily had chosen someone else. Not another executive. Not another billionaire. A janitor. The thought felt surreal. Nathan's pride took the blow personally. Because deep down he couldn't understand it. He offered wealth. Status. Security. Influence. Everything society claimed women wanted. Lucas offered none of those things. Yet somehow Emily had chosen him. Nathan hated mysteries he couldn't solve. This one consumed him. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Richard Carter entered. The expression on his face looked even worse. Nathan immediately understood. This wasn't simply a personal problem anymore. This was a family problem. A corporate problem. A public relations problem. Richard closed the door. For several seconds neither man spoke. Then Richard sighed. This has gone too far. Nathan remained silent. Richard continued. Investors are calling. Of course they were. Investors always called. Nathan finally spoke. What do they want? Richard laughed humorlessly. The same thing everyone wants answers. Control. Reassurance. A solution. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Neither man said Lucas's name often. Neither needed to. The problem remained obvious. Elsewhere, Emily faced an even worse confrontation. Her mother arrived unexpectedly. Directly at headquarters. Never a good sign. The moment Victoria entered Emily's office, the temperature dropped. Neither smiled. Neither pretended. The photograph sat between them. A silent accusation. Victoria stared at it. Then at her daughter. Tell me it isn't true. Emily met her gaze. No. The answer landed heavily. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. As though hoping reality might change. It didn't. When she looked up again, disappointment filled her expression. Not anger. Disappointment. Somehow that hurt more. Emily. Her voice softened. Why? The question irritated her immediately. Not because it existed. Because of what it implied. As though caring about Lucas required explanation. As though loving him was irrational. As though happiness needed justification. Emily folded her arms. Because I care about him. Victoria stared. The simplicity of the answer seemed to confuse her. That's it? Emily nodded. That's everything? Silence followed. Long. Heavy. Painful. Finally Victoria stood. The conversation wasn't over. Not even close. But neither knew how to continue it. Not today. After she left, Emily remained alone. Thinking. Waiting. Trying to prepare for whatever came next. Unfortunately, whatever came next arrived sooner than expected. Late that afternoon, Lucas received a message. Human Resources. Conference Room 17. Immediately, his stomach dropped. Across the building, Emily received a similar message. Boardroom. Immediately. The timing felt impossible to ignore. A trap, a setup, a confrontation, something. Neither knew exactly what. Yet both felt the same dread. Because for the first time, Their relationship wasn't simply attracting attention. It was attracting resistance. Powerful resistance. People who disliked gossip could be ignored. People who disliked headlines could be ignored. People who disliked the relationship itself. Those people were far more dangerous. Especially when they controlled companies. Especially when they controlled families. Especially when they believed they were protecting the future. As evening settled across Manhattan, both Emily and Lucas walked toward separate meetings. Separate rooms. Separate battles. Yet the same conflict. Because the fallout had only begun. The kiss had changed everything, and now everyone was choosing sides. Friends, family, executives, employees, investors, everyone. The line had been drawn. And for the first time, Emily and Lucas stood together on one side of it, while the rest of the world gathered on the other. The meetings were exactly as bad as Emily and Lucas expected, possibly worse. Emily's meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Lucas's lasted less than 30 minutes, yet both walked away feeling the same thing. Pressure. Heavy. Relentless. Deliberate pressure. Inside the boardroom, Emily had spent the afternoon defending her personal life to people who claimed they were discussing business. Investors asked careful questions. Executives expressed polite concerns. Board members talked about public image. Nobody directly told her to end the relationship. They didn't need to. Every sentence carried the same message. Lucas was a problem. The relationship was a problem. She was expected to solve the problem. Emily had never felt more disgusted. Meanwhile, human resources handled Lucas differently. No lectures. No direct criticism. No official threats. Instead, they delivered something arguably worse. Awkward sympathy. Careful warnings. Subtle suggestions. One manager even advised him to consider the long-term consequences. Lucas left the meeting feeling strangely insulted. Not because anyone had attacked him. Because everyone assumed he didn't understand reality. As though he had somehow wandered into a situation beyond his comprehension. The experience strengthened one realization. People weren't upset because of what he had done. People were upset because of who he was. And who he wasn't. That truth remained impossible to ignore. The following morning, Emily arrived at work furious. Not emotional, not upset, furious. A calm, focused anger. The kind that produced action. By noon, she had already challenged 2 executives and rejected 3 attempts to discuss her relationship. The 4th attempt arrived from Arthur Bennett. Naturally. Arthur entered her office carrying reports. The reports were merely an excuse. Emily knew it. Arthur knew it. Neither bothered pretending otherwise. Arthur sat down. Emily remained standing. What do you want? Arthur looked offended. I'm concerned. Emily laughed. A short laugh. A dangerous laugh. No. Arthur frowned. No. You're not concerned. Her eyes narrowed. You're judgmental. The words landed harder than Arthur expected. For several seconds he remained silent. Emily continued. Let's stop pretending. Arthur adjusted his tie. This isn't personal. Emily laughed again. That made 3 times. Never a good sign. Then explain why nobody questioned Nathan. Arthur hesitated. That hesitation provided the answer. Emily stepped closer. Nathan's personal life never became a boardroom discussion. Arthur remained silent. Emily continued. Interesting. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Not because Arthur won. Because he clearly lost. The realization spread quickly. Emily was no longer tolerating criticism. No longer apologizing. No longer retreating. She was fighting back. Across the building, Lucas fought a different battle. His wasn't political. It was internal. For weeks Emily had encouraged him to believe in himself again. For weeks she had challenged the narrative he carried about failure. For weeks she had reminded him of something he kept forgetting. Potential doesn't disappear. Eventually those words began taking root. That afternoon, Lucas sat alone in a public library after work. The same finance textbooks he had abandoned years ago sat open before him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't reading out of curiosity. He was reading with purpose. The feeling seemed unfamiliar. Exciting, terrifying, hopeful. Marcus found him there 2 hours later. "You look serious." Lucas looked up. Marcus stared at the books, then laughed. "Oh." Lucas smiled slightly. "What?" Marcus pointed. "You finally listened." Lucas shook his head. "Maybe." Marcus dropped into a chair. For several moments he examined the books. Financial analysis, investment management, corporate valuation, advanced forecasting, the old dream, the abandoned dream. Marcus eventually looked at him. "You thinking about going back?" Lucas didn't answer immediately, because answering aloud made it real. Finally he nodded. "Maybe." Marcus smiled. "Good." Lucas laughed softly. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't." Marcus shrugged. "But neither is spending the next 30 years wondering what would have happened." The words lingered. Because they were true. Painfully true. That evening, Emily called him. Not texted. Called. The sound of her voice immediately improved his mood. "Hey, hey." A brief silence followed. Comfortable. Familiar. Then Emily spoke. "I need to see you." Lucas smiled automatically. "That serious?" "Yes." "Everything okay?" Emily laughed. No. 20 minutes later they met in a quiet city park. Autumn had begun transforming the trees. Golden leaves drifted through the evening air. The city seemed distant, muted, peaceful. Exactly what both needed. Emily sat beside him on a bench, immediately leaning back and closing her eyes. Lucas studied her carefully. "Rough day." She laughed. "Rough month." "A fair. Very fair." For several minutes neither spoke, simply enjoying the silence. Eventually Emily opened her eyes, then smiled. "Tell me something good." Lucas looked surprised. "Something good?" "Anything." He thought for a moment, then shrugged. "I went to the library." Emily sat upright instantly. "The library?" Lucas nodded. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why?" Lucas laughed. The reaction was immediate. Exactly what he expected. "Maybe I was studying." Emily stared, then smiled. A huge smile, the kind that transformed her entire face. Lucas immediately felt warmer, happier, more hopeful. Just from seeing her happy, the realization remained dangerous, yet impossible to deny. "You were studying." Lucas nodded. Emily looked genuinely excited, as though he had announced incredible news, which in her mind, he had. For the next several minutes she bombarded him with questions, books, subjects, plans, goals. Every answer seemed to make her happier. Finally Lucas laughed. "What?" Emily shook her head. "Nothing. That's a lie." "Okay." She smiled. "I'm proud of you." The words hit unexpectedly hard. Lucas looked away, emotion tightening his chest again. That kept happening around her, more and more lately. Emily noticed. For a moment neither spoke. Then she reached over and gently touched his hand. A simple gesture. Small, natural, yet somehow powerful. Lucas looked down, then at her. The connection between them felt undeniable now. Visible. Real. No longer hidden. No longer theoretical. Just real. The conversation eventually shifted toward dreams, toward futures, toward possibilities. Topics they had previously avoided, perhaps because they felt safer now, stronger, more certain. At one point Emily asked a question, a dangerous question. "If you could do anything." Lucas smiled. "Anything?" "Anything." "Yeah," carefully, then answered honestly. "I'd finish what I started." The Emily nodded. The dream remained alive, still buried, but alive. "What about you?" he asked. Emily looked toward the city skyline, thinking for a long time. Finally she answered, "I'd stop living for everyone else." The honesty startled even her. Lucas didn't look surprised. Instead, he simply nodded, because he understood, better than anyone. Both of them had spent years trapped by expectations. Different expectations. Different worlds. The same prison. The realization connected them in ways neither had anticipated. As darkness settled over the park, the conversation slowed. Neither wanted to leave. yet neither wanted to force the evening longer than necessary. Eventually they stood, walking slowly toward the parking area. At the edge of the park, they stopped. The moment felt familiar now. Their lingering goodbyes had become almost routine. Lucas smiled. "You know something?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "What?" "You're stubborn." She laughed. "That's not a compliment." "It is from me." Emily shook her head, still smiling, then kissed him. Quickly, softly, naturally, as though it had always belonged there. Lucas smiled. And for the first time in weeks, both felt something stronger than pressure, stronger than fear, stronger than judgment. Hope, real hope. Because for the first time, they weren't simply defending a relationship. They were building futures. Lucas was moving toward the life he abandoned. Emily was moving toward the life she actually wanted. The journey remained difficult. The opposition remained powerful. The criticism remained constant. But something important had changed. Neither was fighting alone anymore. Unfortunately, elsewhere in Manhattan, another battle was already taking shape. Nathan Kingsley sat inside his office reviewing documents. Financial documents, contract documents, board documents, information most people would never see. His expression remained calm, calculated, dangerously calm. Because while Emily and Lucas focused on building something together, Nathan had begun planning how to tear it apart. And unlike gossip, unlike rumors, unlike social pressure, the next move would have real consequences, consequences capable of affecting far more than emotions, far more than reputations, consequences capable of changing lives. The storm was coming, and neither Emily nor Lucas yet understood how powerful it would become. The storm arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it arrived without warning. Emily entered Carter Global Headquarters expecting an ordinary day. Meetings, reports, presentations, the usual routine. Instead, she stepped into chaos. The moment she reached the executive floor, she knew something was wrong. Employees moved quickly through the hallways. Phones rang constantly. Conference rooms were filled. People whispered urgently. No one smiled. No one relaxed. The atmosphere felt tense, dangerously tense. Megan intercepted her before she reached her office. Thank God. Emily frowned. What happened? Megan handed her a tablet. Emily read the headline, then read it again, then a third time. A major Carter Global acquisition had collapsed overnight. Not delayed. Not challenged. Collapsed. Hundreds of millions of dollars were suddenly at risk. Investors were furious. The board demanded answers. Emily looked up. What happened? Megan's expression darkened. That's the problem. Nobody knew. Within minutes, Emily found herself inside an emergency board meeting. Every major executive was present. Richard Carter stood near the screen displaying financial reports. Nathan sat beside him. Arthur Bennett occupied the opposite side of the table. Everyone looked stressed. Richard began immediately. The acquisition documents were leaked. The room fell silent. Emily blinked. Leaked. Richard nodded. Confidential information reached our competitors. A wave of disbelief spread through the room. Confidential documents represented the company's most protected assets. Someone had betrayed them. The realization chilled everyone. Richard continued. Our competitors adjusted their position before negotiations concluded. Emily understood instantly. The deal had been sabotaged. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Questions immediately erupted around the room. Who leaked it? Why? How? Nobody had answers. At least not yet. The investigation began immediately. Every executive became a suspect. Every department faced scrutiny. Every communication was examined. Hours passed, then days. The company remained trapped in crisis. Investors grew increasingly hostile. The board demanded progress. And slowly, suspicion began moving toward a single target. Nathan Kingsley. At first, the idea seemed impossible. Nathan was the CEO, the golden executive, the trusted leader, the future of the company. Nobody wanted to believe it. Yet evidence continued appearing. Small pieces. Tiny inconsistencies, unexplained communications, missing records, strange financial movements. Nothing definitive, but enough to create doubt. Emily noticed Nathan becoming increasingly defensive. That alone felt unusual. Nathan normally projected confidence. Now he seemed tense, distracted, agitated. The change bothered her. 3 days later, another discovery changed everything. Emily was reviewing archived financial reports when she noticed something strange. A transaction. Small compared to company standards, yet oddly structured. The timing matched the acquisition leak. Curiosity turned into concern. Concern turned into suspicion. She continued digging. Hours passed. More transactions appeared, then more. Each one connected to shell companies. Each one connected to accounts that ultimately traced back toward a familiar name. Nathan. Emily stared at the screen. Her pulse quickened. No, it couldn't be. Could it? She immediately contacted Richard. Within an hour, a private investigation team was reviewing the evidence. By evening, the situation had become explosive. Meanwhile, Lucas remained completely unaware. His focus stayed elsewhere: the library, classes, finance, the future. For the first time in years, he felt momentum returning, hope returning, purpose returning. The feeling seemed almost unreal. He spent evenings studying, weekends learning. Every small step felt meaningful. For the first time in a very long time, he could imagine a future beyond survival. A future built on possibility. That future increasingly included Emily. Not just emotionally. Practically. The thought still amazed him. Because despite everything they faced, she never seemed to doubt him. Never questioned his ability. Never treated him like less. That belief had become one of the most important things in his life. Unfortunately, trouble was approaching faster than either realized. The following Monday, Emily received confirmation. The evidence was real. The transactions existed. The connections existed. The investigation had uncovered enough to force action. An emergency board meeting was scheduled immediately. Every senior executive attended. Nathan included. The atmosphere felt electric. Dangerous. Richard opened the meeting without hesitation. New information has been discovered. The room became silent. Nathan sat perfectly still. Richard continued. Financial records appeared on the large screen. Transaction histories, account transfers, corporate structures, evidence. Lots of evidence. Emily watched Nathan carefully. For the first time since she had known him, uncertainty appeared. Genuine uncertainty. Richard's voice hardened. The investigation identified serious irregularities. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nathan finally leaned forward. What exactly are you implying? Richard met his gaze. The silence lasted several seconds. Then, I'm implying someone inside this company sabotaged the acquisition. The room erupted immediately. Questions, arguments, accusations, confusion. Nathan remained calm, at least outwardly. But Emily noticed something. Fear, tiny, brief, yet unmistakable. The meeting lasted 4 exhausting hours. By the end, no formal conclusions had been reached. Yet one thing had become obvious. Nathan's position was no longer secure. The perfect executive suddenly looked vulnerable. And vulnerability made people nervous, especially powerful people. That evening, Emily finally escaped the building. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. The entire situation felt surreal. The company faced crisis. The board faced division. Her family faced uncertainty. Everything seemed unstable. She found Lucas waiting near the park where they often met. The moment she saw him, some of the tension disappeared. Not all of it. Enough. Lucas immediately noticed her expression. Bad day. Emily laughed softly. Terrible day. He nodded. Want to talk about it? For the next hour she explained everything. The investigation, the evidence, the boardroom battles, the growing suspicion surrounding Nathan. Lucas listened carefully. As always. When she finished, silence followed. Then Lucas spoke. If it's true. Emily nodded. I know. The betrayal felt personal, not because she loved Nathan, because she had trusted him, respected him, believed he cared about the company. Discovering otherwise hurt. Lucas looked toward the city skyline. Sometimes people spend so much time building an image they forget who they are. The observation lingered. Because it felt true. Painfully true. Nathan had always seemed perfect. Perhaps that was the warning sign. Nobody was perfect. Not really. Eventually, Emily leaned against Lucas. The simple contact felt comforting. Safe. For several minutes, neither spoke. The city lights illuminated the darkness around them. Everything felt quiet, peaceful. A brief pause before the next storm. Because deep inside Carter Global, the investigation continued. More evidence surfaced. More questions emerged. More secrets waited to be uncovered. And somewhere beneath all of it sat a truth capable of changing everything. A truth that would soon force Nathan Kingsley into a corner. And cornered people often made dangerous choices. Very dangerous choices. For the first time since the crisis began, Carter Global looked vulnerable. Employees felt it. Investors felt it. The board felt it. Every headline discussing the failed acquisition damaged confidence a little more. The company remained strong, but uncertainty had appeared. And uncertainty spread quickly. Emily spent nearly every waking hour helping manage the fallout. Meetings began before sunrise. Conference calls continued late into the evening. Investigators moved through every department. Executives operated under constant pressure. The situation exhausted everyone, especially Richard Carter. The company represented his life's work. Watching it suffer felt personal. Very personal. One evening, Emily found him alone inside his office. The lights were dim. The city stretched beyond the windows. For the first time in years, he looked old. Not physically, emotionally. The realization hurt. Richard glanced up. "You should go home." Emily smiled faintly. "So should you." And neither moved. After a moment, Richard sighed. "I never imagined something like this." Emily sat across from him. Knew. Neither had. The silence lingered. Then Richard surprised her. "How's Lucas?" Emily blinked. The question seemed completely unrelated. Yet somehow it wasn't. She studied her father carefully. The hostility she expected wasn't there. Only curiosity. Maybe exhaustion had softened him. Maybe reality had shifted his priorities. Or maybe he was finally beginning to see beyond appearances. Is okay. Richard nodded slowly. Nothing more. Nothing less. The conversation moved on. Yet the moment stayed with Emily. Because it felt important. A small crack in a wall that had existed for years. Meanwhile, Lucas spent his evenings balancing work and study. The routine wasn't easy. Long shifts, long nights, constant effort. Yet he loved it. For the first time in years, he felt movement. Progress. A future. The old dream no longer felt impossible. It felt difficult. There was a difference. One Saturday afternoon, Emily arrived at the library carrying coffee. Lucas looked up from his textbooks. Then smiled. The sight immediately improved her mood. "You're becoming predictable." Lucas laughed. "Says the woman who always brings coffee." Emily placed the cup beside him. "How's studying?" Lucas looked down at the open pages. Hard. A pause. "Good." Emily smiled. That answer sounded exactly like him. For the next hour they sat together. Lucas studying. Emily reviewing reports. Occasionally talking. Occasionally laughing. Comfortable silence filling the gaps. Simple moments like these had become increasingly valuable. Especially now. Especially during chaos. Unfortunately, chaos soon followed them again. 3 days later, the investigation reached a critical stage. New evidence emerged. And with it, a new problem. The board needed someone capable of reviewing several years of complicated financial projections connected to the failed acquisition. The analysis required weeks of work, perhaps months. The senior analysts were already overwhelmed. The finance department was stretched beyond capacity. Nobody had a solution. During an emergency strategy meeting, executives debated possibilities. Hours passed. No progress. The discussion became increasingly frustrating. Emily sat quietly, listening, thinking. Then a thought appeared. Dangerous, unexpected, possibly brilliant. She hesitated, then raised her hand. The room fell silent. Richard looked at her. Yes. Emily took a breath. I know someone. Several executives frowned. Someone. The room waited. Emily continued. Someone who might help. Arthur immediately looked skeptical. Who? Emily answered. Lucas Reed. The silence that followed felt enormous. Arthur actually laughed, not loudly, just enough to irritate everyone, especially Emily. You're serious? Emily met his gaze completely. Arthur shook his head. Emily. No. Her voice sharpened. Listen first. The room grew quiet again. Richard folded his hands. Explain. Emily did. The financial models. The forecasting work. The analytical skills. The ideas that had already helped solve previous problems. Everything. By the time she finished, several executives looked thoughtful. Arthur still looked unconvinced, naturally. Nathan looked irritated, also naturally. Richard remained silent, thinking. Finally he spoke. Bring him in. Arthur immediately objected. Richard, bring him in. The decision was made. 24 hours later, Lucas Reed entered an executive conference room for the first time in his life. The experience felt surreal. The room itself looked intimidating. Massive screens, luxury furnishings, powerful people. People who normally wouldn't even notice him. Now they were waiting, watching, evaluating. Lucas remained calm, at least outwardly. Inside, his heart was working overtime. Emily sat near the end of the table. The moment their eyes met, some of his nerves disappeared. Not all. Enough. Richard began. Emily believes you can help us. Lucas glanced toward her. Then back toward the board. I'll try. Arthur sighed dramatically. The sound irritated Lucas immediately. Richard ignored it. Several documents appeared on the screen. Financial records, projection models, acquisition structures, complex material. The kind Lucas once dreamed of analyzing professionally. The old excitement returned instantly. Without thinking, he stepped closer. The room disappeared. The nerves disappeared. Everything disappeared except the numbers. For nearly 40 minutes, Lucas reviewed information, asked questions, made notes. The board watched carefully. At first, skepticism dominated, then curiosity, then surprise. Because Lucas wasn't guessing, he understood the material, deeply, naturally, confidently. Eventually he stopped, then pointed toward several transactions. Start here. The room became silent. Richard looked up. Why? Lucas explained, patiently, clearly, step by step. The explanation revealed connections investigators had overlooked. Patterns hidden beneath thousands of documents. Patterns suggesting deliberate manipulation. The room listened, really listened. By the end, nobody looked skeptical anymore. Not even Arthur. The realization felt almost unbelievable. After the meeting concluded, investigators immediately began reviewing Lucas's observations. The results arrived 2 days later. He had been right. Not partially right. Completely right. The evidence uncovered through his analysis opened an entirely new path. One that led directly toward the people responsible. The reaction inside Carter Global was immediate. Executives began looking at Lucas differently. Employees began talking about him differently. For the first time, people saw more than a maintenance uniform. They saw capability, intelligence, value, respect. Things Emily had seen all along. That evening she found Lucas outside headquarters. The city glowed around them. Traffic moved through the streets below. Neither spoke immediately. Both smiled. Eventually Emily broke the silence. Told you. Lucas laughed. You did. I absolutely did. Lucas shook his head. The entire experience still felt unreal. 1 week earlier, he had been studying finance books in a library. Now senior executives were asking for his opinion. Life moved strangely sometimes. Emily stepped closer. You were amazing. The compliment made him uncomfortable, which only amused her. Lucas looked away. I'm not amazing. Emily smiled. No. A pause. "You're finally getting a chance." The words hit harder than any compliment. Because they were true. This wasn't about talent appearing suddenly. The talent had always existed. The opportunity hadn't. For several moments neither spoke. Then Lucas looked at her. "You never doubted me." Emily didn't hesitate. "No." The answer arrived instantly. Without thought. Without uncertainty. Without conditions. Lucas felt something tighten in his chest. A familiar feeling now. One that seemed to happen whenever she looked at him that way. With belief. With trust. With certainty. Across town, Nathan Kingsley sat alone inside his office. The latest investigation report rested on his desk. His expression remained calm, controlled. Yet beneath the surface, pressure continued building. The walls were closing in. Evidence continued appearing. Questions continued multiplying. And now another problem had emerged. Lucas Reed. The man Nathan once dismissed had become something else entirely. A threat. Not because of Emily. Not anymore. Because Lucas was helping uncover the truth. And the truth represented the greatest danger of all. Nathan stared out at the city lights. For the first time in years, he couldn't see a clear path forward. The realization unsettled him. Because powerful people could survive mistakes. Powerful people could survive scandals. But powerful people rarely survived exposure. And exposure was coming. Faster than anyone realized. The truth arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Piece by piece. Document by document. Evidence by evidence. Until denial became impossible. For nearly 2 weeks, investigators followed the trail Lucas had uncovered. Every new discovery led to another. Every answer created new questions. Every question led closer to the same destination. Nathan Kingsley. By now, very few people inside Carter Global believed the evidence was coincidence. The patterns were too clear. The connections too strong. The financial activity too deliberate. Someone had manipulated company information. Someone had benefited from confidential leaks. Someone had betrayed Carter Global. And every road led toward Nathan. Richard Carter spent most of those 2 weeks inside conference rooms. Lawyers arrived. Forensic accountants arrived. Private investigators arrived. The situation had evolved far beyond an internal company issue. Now legal consequences were becoming possible. Very serious legal consequences. Emily watched the entire process unfold with mixed emotions. Part of her felt angry. Part of her felt disappointed. Part of her still struggled to believe it. Because despite everything, she had respected Nathan once. Trusted him. Believed in him. Now every new revelation destroyed another piece of that trust. The hardest part wasn't discovering who Nathan was. The hardest part was realizing who he had always been. One afternoon, Richard called an emergency board meeting. Every director attended. Every senior executive attended. The atmosphere felt tense from the moment people entered the room. No one spoke much. No one smiled. Everyone understood the significance of the meeting. Something major was about to happen. Nathan arrived last. His expression remained composed. Professional. Confident. At least outwardly. Emily noticed the difference immediately. His confidence looked forced now. Manufactured. Like a man trying to maintain control while watching it disappear. The meeting began. Richard stood. Several legal advisors occupied seats near the back of the room. That alone told everyone how serious the situation had become. Richard's voice remained calm. "We have completed the investigation." The room became completely silent. No movement. No whispers. Nothing. Just anticipation. Richard continued. "The findings are conclusive." Nathan didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't blink. Yet Emily noticed something. His hands. For the first time, they looked tense. Richard pressed a button. Documents appeared on the large screen. Transaction records, communication logs, financial statements, corporate structures, months of evidence. The presentation lasted nearly 40 minutes. Nobody interrupted. Nobody argued. The facts spoke loudly enough. By the end, The conclusion had become unavoidable. Nathan Kingsley had secretly provided information to outside parties. He had profited through hidden investments. He had manipulated internal decisions. And he had helped sabotage Carter Global's acquisition. The room sat in stunned silence. Even people who suspected the truth looked shaken. Because seeing evidence felt different than hearing rumors. Evidence removed doubt. Nathan finally stood. For a moment everyone expected a denial. An explanation. Something. Instead he laughed softly. The sound surprised everyone, including Emily. Nathan looked around the room, then shook his head. Incredible. Richard stared at him. You have something to say. Nathan's smile disappeared. Instantly. Completely. And for the first time, the polished executive vanished. The mask came off. What remained looked colder, harder, angrier. You want the truth. The room remained silent. Nathan continued. The truth is this company made me. His voice grew sharper. Then spent years reminding me I would never truly own it. Emily stared. She had never heard him speak like this, never. Nathan paced slowly. I built profits. A pause. I built growth. Another pause. I built value. His eyes moved toward Richard. And no matter what I accomplished, this company still belonged to someone else. The room listened carefully. Nathan laughed again. Bitterly. You think that doesn't matter? Nobody answered. Nathan wasn't finished. Years of frustration poured out. Resentment, ambition, entitlement, everything hidden beneath the perfect image. The more he spoke, the more obvious the truth became. Nathan didn't believe he had betrayed Carter Global. He believed Carter Global had betrayed him. The distinction frightened Emily. Because it explained everything. People could justify almost anything when they convinced themselves they were victims. Eventually Richard interrupted. Enough? The single word echoed through the room. Nathan stopped speaking. The silence that followed felt heavy, final, inevitable. Richard looked toward the board, then the attorneys, then back toward Nathan. His voice remained steady. You are terminated immediately. No emotion, no hesitation, just fact. Nathan stood perfectly still. The reality settled slowly. The fight was over. He had lost, not just his position, his reputation, his future, his legacy, everything. Without another word, Nathan collected his belongings and walked toward the door. Halfway there, he stopped, turning briefly toward Emily. For a second, she saw something unexpected. Not anger, not hatred. Regret. Then the moment disappeared. Nathan left. The door closed behind him. And just like that, one chapter ended. The aftermath spread quickly. Employees learned the news within hours. Investors learned by evening. The media learned shortly afterward. The headlines exploded. Former CEO removed following internal investigation. Corporate betrayal exposed. Leadership scandal rocks Carter Global. For several days, chaos dominated everything. Yet beneath the chaos existed something else. Relief. The uncertainty was gone. The truth was known. And truth, however painful, was easier to face than suspicion. Meanwhile, another story quietly emerged inside the company. Lucas. People talked about the investigation. But they also talked about the man who helped uncover the truth. Executives who once ignored him now sought his opinion. Managers greeted him differently. Employees treated him differently. The change felt surreal. One afternoon, Lucas entered a conference room to deliver reports. Several executives stood as he entered. The gesture shocked him. Not because standing was unusual. Because these were the same people who once looked through him. Now they looked at him. Really looked at him. Respectfully. The difference felt strange. Almost uncomfortable. Later that evening, Emily found him on the rooftop observation deck. The city stretched endlessly around them. Lights illuminated the skyline. The storm clouds had finally disappeared. Lucas leaned against the railing, lost in thought. Emily approached quietly. You were right. Lucas looked over. About what? Everything. He laughed. That's definitely not true. Emily smiled. The investigation. Lucas looked away. The attention still made him uncomfortable. Emily stepped beside him. For several moments neither spoke. The city provided enough sound, enough presence, enough peace. Eventually Lucas broke the silence. "How's your father?" Emily sighed. "Tired." A pause. But bettered. Richard had changed over the past few weeks. The crisis had affected him deeply. More importantly, it had forced him to reevaluate certain assumptions, including assumptions about Lucas. Emily had noticed it. Small moments, subtle changes. Nothing dramatic, yet meaningful. Very meaningful. Lucas nodded. The conversation drifted naturally, as always. Eventually Emily smiled. "You know something?" "What?" "A lot of people owe you an apology." Lucas laughed. "That sounds exhausting." Emily laughed too. The answer was exactly what she expected. For Lucas, recognition had never been the goal. Helping had. That difference remained one of the things she loved most about him. The realization appeared unexpectedly. Loved, not cared about, not admired. The word settled quietly into her thoughts. Yet it felt right, perfectly right. Across town, Richard Carter sat alone inside his office. The building had finally grown quiet. For the first time in weeks, he had a chance to think, really think. About the company. About Nathan. About Emily. About Lucas. The last thought lingered longest. Richard stared out at the city. Then remembered something. The speech at the appreciation gala. The way Emily defended Lucas. The certainty in her voice. At the time, Richard believed emotion clouded her judgment. Now he wasn't so sure. Because while powerful executives had failed him, Lucas Reed had not. The realization mattered. More than Richard wanted to admit. And somewhere deep inside, a perspective that once seemed impossible had begun to change. Slowly. Quietly. One thought at a time. The truth had been revealed. Nathan's lies had collapsed. The company had survived. And now a different challenge remained. One involving family, love, expectations, and choices. Because while the battle for Carter Global was finally ending, the battle for Emily's future was only beginning. The weeks following Nathan's departure brought a sense of calm back to Carter Global. Not complete calm. The company still faced challenges. Investors still demanded answers. Rebuilding trust still required work. But the crisis had passed. The bleeding had stopped. For the first time in months, people could focus on the future again. That future looked brighter than anyone expected. Especially for Lucas Reed. His role inside the company had changed dramatically. Not officially. Not yet. But everyone felt it. Executives requested his input. Analysts sought his opinions. Managers treated him as an equal. The transformation remained surreal. A few months earlier, many of those same people barely noticed him. Now they listened. Respected him. Valued him. Lucas appreciated it. Yet he never allowed it to change him. He still arrived early. Still treated people kindly. Still carried himself exactly the same way. That consistency earned even more respect. Meanwhile, Emily found herself happier than she had been in years. The constant pressure surrounding Nathan had disappeared. The endless expectations had weakened. Not vanished, but weakened. Most importantly, she no longer questioned her feelings. She loved Lucas. The realization felt simple now. Natural, certain. The confusion was gone. The fear remained. But the confusion was gone. One afternoon, Richard Carter requested a private meeting. The message immediately made Emily nervous. Old habits died hard. For years, private meetings with her father usually meant conflict, pressure, expectations, disappointment. She entered his office cautiously. Richard sat behind his desk reviewing documents. When he looked up, something seemed different, softer, less guarded. "Sit down." Emily obeyed, preparing for another argument. Instead, Richard surprised her. "How are you?" Emily blinked. The question seemed genuine, not strategic, not manipulative. Genuine, okay. Richard nodded. For several moments he said nothing, then finally leaned back. "I owe you an apology." Emily stared. certain she had misunderstood. What? Richard smiled faintly. I said I owe you an apology. The words felt almost impossible. Richard Carter rarely apologized, especially when he believed he was protecting his family. Emily remained silent. Richard continued. I spent a long time believing I knew what was best for you. A pause. Maybe I forgot that your life belongs to you. Emotion tightened Emily's chest unexpectedly, not because the apology fixed everything, because she never expected to hear it. Richard looked toward the city skyline. I judged Lucas unfairly. Another pause. A lot of people did. Emily smiled softly. Yeah. Richard nodded. I know. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. No arguments. No pressure. No demands. Just honesty. When Emily finally left the office, she felt lighter, as though a weight she had carried for years had finally begun to disappear. Unfortunately, one challenge remained. Victoria Carter. Unlike Richard, Victoria struggled to let go. Not because she was cruel, because she was afraid. Afraid her daughter would suffer. Afraid Emily would give up opportunities. Afraid love would eventually turn into regret. The fears came from concern. That didn't make them easier to handle. Several days later, Victoria invited Emily to lunch. The invitation sounded innocent. It wasn't. Halfway through the meal, the conversation turned exactly where Emily expected. Are you serious about him? Emily nearly laughed. There it was. Finally. The question everyone wanted answered. She looked directly at her mother. Yes. Victoria studied her carefully. The certainty in Emily's voice left no room for doubt. That's serious. Emily nodded. That's serious. The answer lingered between them. Heavy, important, final. Victoria sighed. For several moments she looked out the restaurant window, thinking, remembering, processing. When she finally spoke again, her voice sounded softer. I always wanted the best for you. Emily smiled sadly. I know. And she did know. That was what made everything so complicated. Her parents weren't villains. They were parents. Flawed. Protective. Human. Victoria shook her head. I just never imagined. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Emily reached across the table and squeezed her hand. A small gesture, an important one. Victoria looked down, then back up finally. She smiled. A small smile, but real. If he hurts you. Emily laughed. There she is. Victoria laughed too. The tension broke. Not completely. Enough. Meanwhile, Lucas faced a challenge of his own. Opportunity. For years he had dreamed about a second chance. Now one sat directly in front of him. Richard Carter personally offered him a position within the company's financial analysis division. The offer shocked him. Not because he lacked ability. Because he never expected it. The meeting itself felt surreal. Richard sat across from him. No executives, no board members, just two men talking. Richard folded his hands. You've earned this. Lucas immediately shook his head. No. Richard raised an eyebrow. No. Lucas smiled. I earned an opportunity. A pause. Everything after that is on me. For a moment Richard simply stared. Then laughed softly. The answer impressed him, because it confirmed what he already suspected. Lucas wasn't looking for charity. Never had been. Richard extended the offer anyway. Lucas accepted. The next chapter of his life officially began. That evening he met Emily at the park, where they had shared countless conversations. The setting sun painted the sky with shades of gold and orange. Everything looked peaceful. Hopeful. The kind of evening that felt significant. Emily immediately noticed his expression. What happened? Lucas smiled. The smile alone gave him away. Emily gasped. No. Lucas nodded. Her eyes widened. No way. Lucas laughed. Way. Emily practically threw her arms around him. The force of the hug nearly knocked him backward. Neither cared. For several moments they simply stood there, holding each other, laughing, celebrating. A future that once seemed impossible now stood directly ahead of them. Eventually they sat on a nearby bench, watching the sunset, talking about possibilities, plans, dreams. The conversation naturally drifted toward the future, a topic neither avoided anymore. At one point, Emily turned toward him. "Can I ask something?" Lucas smiled. "Always." She hesitated, then asked the question. "The old dream." Lucas nodded. "What about it?" Emily smiled. "Do you still want it?" Lucas looked toward the horizon, thinking carefully, then answered, "More than ever." The certainty in his voice made her smile, because she believed him, completely. The future remained uncertain. Challenges remained. Nothing was guaranteed. Yet for the first time, both felt ready for whatever came next. A week later, Carter Global hosted its annual leadership summit. Executives, investors, partners, media representatives. Hundreds of guests filled the massive ballroom. The event represented a fresh start, a new chapter, a chance to move beyond the scandal. Near the end of the evening, Richard delivered a speech. The company had survived. The future looked strong. Everything appeared positive. Then Richard surprised everyone, including Emily, including Lucas, including himself. He looked directly toward the audience, toward his daughter, then smiled. "My greatest mistake this year wasn't a business decision." The room became silent, curious, confused. Richard continued. "My greatest mistake was believing success could be measured by status." Emily froze. So did Lucas. The entire room listened carefully. Richard's gaze settled on them. "For a long time I forgot that character matters more." A pause. "Courage matters more." Another pause. "Integrity matters more." The message couldn't have been clearer. The room understood immediately. So did Emily. Emotion filled her chest, unexpectedly powerful. Richard smiled, then finished. "And sometimes the best decisions are the ones people least expect." Applause erupted. Loud, sincere, genuine. Emily looked toward Lucas. Lucas looked toward her. Neither needed words. Because after everything they had endured, the choice had finally been made. Not by investors, not by executives, not by families, by them. Emily chose love, openly, proudly, without apology. And for the first time, the world stopped trying to stop her. The following year changed everything. Not overnight, not through luck, not through miracles. Through work. Consistent, determined, relentless work. For Lucas Reed, the transformation began on his first day in the financial analysis division. The office felt very different from the maintenance department. Different responsibilities. Different expectations. Different challenges. Yet one thing remained the same. Him? Lucas approached the opportunity exactly the way he approached everything else, with humility, discipline, and effort. The learning curve proved steep. The workload proved demanding. The pressure proved real. But for the first time in many years, he felt exactly where he belonged. Every late night felt worthwhile. Every challenge felt meaningful. Every success felt earned. The executives who once doubted him slowly became his strongest supporters. Not because of his relationship with Emily, because of his performance, because of his intelligence, because of his character. The respect he received now came from achievement, and that meant everything. Meanwhile, Emily's life transformed as well. The pressure that once controlled her decisions no longer held the same power. She still worked hard, still carried enormous responsibilities, still faced challenges. But now she lived differently. Now she made choices for herself. The freedom felt unfamiliar at first, then wonderful. The relationship with her parents improved steadily. Richard became one of Lucas's biggest advocates, a development that still amused Emily. Watching the two men discuss business strategies over dinner sometimes felt surreal. Victoria required more time, but even she eventually recognized what had become obvious to everyone else. Lucas genuinely loved her daughter, and Emily genuinely loved him. Once that truth became impossible to deny, resistance slowly disappeared. Months passed, then more months. The company continued growing. The scandal faded into history. Nathan Kingsley became a cautionary story discussed in business schools and corporate seminars. A reminder that ambition without integrity eventually destroys itself. Few people spoke about him anymore. Life had moved forward. One autumn evening, Lucas stood on the rooftop observation deck where he and Emily had spent so many hours talking. The city stretched endlessly around him. Lights illuminated the skyline. The same skyline he had stared at countless times before. Only now it looked different, not because the city had changed, because he had. Footsteps approached behind him. He smiled before turning around. Emily. Some habits never changed. She joined him at the railing. For several moments neither spoke. The silence felt familiar, comfortable, perfect. Eventually Emily smiled. "You're thinking again." Lucas laughed. "You always know. You make it obvious." "Fair, very fair." He looked out across the city. "Remember the first gala?" Emily immediately laughed. The fountain. The fountain. The memory felt distant now, almost unbelievable. A chance conversation, a random meeting, a moment neither expected, and yet that moment had changed everything. Emily shook her head. "I can't believe that's how this started." Lucas smiled. "I can." She raised an eyebrow. "You can?" "Yeah." Lucas looked at her. "Because I noticed you immediately." Emily laughed. "That's cheating." "Maybe." "It is definitely cheating." Lucas laughed with her. The sound carried into the evening air. A simple moment. One of thousands they had shared. One of thousands they would continue sharing. The following month, Carter Global hosted another annual gala. Unlike the previous year, the atmosphere felt different. Lighter. Healthier. More genuine. The company had recovered. The people had recovered. The future looked bright. Emily stood near the ballroom entrance greeting guests. The same place she had stood a year earlier. The same elegant surroundings. The same dazzling lights. Yet everything felt different. Because she was different. No longer trapped. No longer uncertain. No longer pretending. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "You look happy, Lucas." Emily smiled immediately. "I am." He offered his arm. This time she accepted without hesitation, without pressure, without expectation, without obligation, only choice. They entered the ballroom together. Hundreds of people noticed. Nobody seemed shocked anymore. Nobody whispered. Nobody stared. They simply smiled. Because the story had changed. People no longer saw a billionaire heiress and a former janitor. They saw Emily and Lucas. Two people who belonged together. The realization felt strangely satisfying. Later that evening, Richard delivered another speech. This one felt far less dramatic than the previous years, yet somehow more meaningful. At one point he looked directly toward Emily and Lucas, then smiled. "My company taught me many lessons." A pause. "But the most important lesson came from my daughter." Emily immediately suspected trouble. Richard laughed softly. "She reminded me that success means very little if you aren't sharing it with people who matter." The room applauded. Emily rolled her eyes. Good-naturedly. Lucas laughed beside her. Some things never changed. After the event ended, the family gathered for dinner, a real family dinner. Not a strategy session disguised as one, not a negotiation, not a discussion about public image. Just family. The evening felt simple, normal, wonderful. Several months later, on a warm spring afternoon, Lucas stood beneath an archway overlooking a garden filled with flowers. Guests occupied rows of seats. Friends, family, coworkers, people from every chapter of their lives. The atmosphere felt joyful, hopeful, perfect. Music began playing. Everyone stood. Lucas looked toward the path ahead, and there she was, Emily. Walking toward him, smiling, beautiful, certain, happy. The sight stole every remaining thought from his mind. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the guests, not the ceremony, not the years of challenges that had brought them here. Only her. When she finally reached him, she laughed softly. A familiar laugh. The same laugh that once echoed through a quiet hallway beside a hotel fountain. The same laugh that had changed his life. The ceremony itself felt like a blur. Vows, promises, laughter, tears, joy. Everything passed too quickly, yet somehow exactly as it should. When they were finally pronounced husband and wife, applause erupted around them. Loud, sincere, heartfelt. Lucas looked at Emily, then kissed her. This time there were no secrets, no whispers, no resistance, only love. The celebration continued late into the evening. Stories were shared, memories were revisited, dreams were discussed. The future stretched ahead of them, wide open, full of possibility. Much later, after the guests departed and the music faded, Emily and Lucas stood together overlooking the city. A familiar habit, one they suspected would continue for many years. The skyline glittered beneath the night sky, beautiful, endless, hopeful. Emily rested her head against his shoulder. Lucas wrapped an arm around her. For several moments neither spoke. Finally Emily broke the silence. "You know something." "What?" She smiled. "I'd choose you again." Lucas laughed softly. "Good." Emily looked up. "Good." He smiled. "Because I'd choose you too." The answer made her laugh. The sound echoed into the night. Warm, happy, free. A year earlier, the world had expected Emily Carter to choose a CEO, a powerful executive, a carefully planned future. Instead, she chose a man most people overlooked. A man judged by his uniform rather than his character. A man who saw her for who she truly was. And in doing so, she discovered something far more valuable than wealth, something far more important than status, something that couldn't be measured by titles, companies, or bank accounts. Love. Real love. The kind built on respect, trust, friendship, and belief. The kind that changes lives. The kind that creates new beginnings. And as the lights of the city stretched endlessly before them, Emily and Lucas stepped forward together. Not into a perfect future, into a real one. And that was more than enough.